City Clerk, if you'll please do a roll call.
Commissioner Robinson,
Here.
Commissioner Rosnicki,
Here.
Commissioner Mulholland,
Here.
Vice Mayor Marriott,
Here.
and Mayor Petrillo.
Here. And with that, I want to welcome Renee Rose to the City of St. Pete Beach. Renee is our new City Clerk. She comes with a wealth of experience in Florida and from beyond. And I just want to say, Renee, thank you so much. Welcome, and we're happy to have you here.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
All right, first we're going to start with presentation. The first one is the employee of the second quarter.
Thank you, Mayor, Commission, and community. It's one of my favorite jobs is to get to introduce our Employee of the Quarter Award winner. And it is with great pride and appreciation that tonight we recognize Davita Thomas as our Employee of the Quarter for quarter two. Davita consistently exemplifies high standards of professionalism, empathy, and excellence in service, making her an invaluable asset to the City of St. Pete Beach. From the moment you meet her, you are welcomed by a warm, genuine smile and a friendly, approachable demeanor that puts people instantly at ease, which is a great asset for an HR professional. She has an extraordinary ability to connect with employees at all levels, earning their trust and admiration. Many team members from all departments seek out her guidance, encouragement, and a listening ear. Her presence brings positivity to every room, and she serves as a true confidant and champion for all. In the words of her colleagues, they have commented she's very helpful. Everyone depends on her. She is the best. She embodies the very best of who we are. Her dedication to our organization extends far beyond her core responsibilities. In the last quarter, she's led multiple priority recruitments with impressive speed, precision, and care. Despite the challenges of managing overlapping recruitments, onboarding, job postings, interview coordination, and the implementation of a new HRIS system, she never missed a beat. The result, 10 successful new hires and promotions delivered while maintaining her regular workload and continuously supporting staff and leadership with tireless energy and grace. Beyond her daily duties, Davita gives back by volunteering her personal time to support colleagues at city events. I saw her at the open house at the fire station, all the weekend events. I always get to run into Davita when I'm there. Really appreciate it. And it really showcases her passion for team unity and community spirit. She is known by first name by over 160 employees, often remembering details about their roles and lives, which is a testament to how deeply she cares for those around her. So with that, congratulations, Davita. Your impact is felt daily, and this recognition is richly deserved.
Does the whole family want to go All right, are we ready?
Well, thank you. All must be very proud of Davita. All right, next we have an update by Calvin Giordano on the comprehensive plan review.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. Hopefully everyone can hear me. Jim Hickey. I'm the Director of Planning for CGA for the state of Florida. With me tonight is Louis Cerna, who's here, and also from Weiss Serota, Ms. Shanae, there she is, Ms. Shanae Wood, She's from the attorneys that we're working on the project with, and is here to make sure I'm saying what I'm supposed to be saying about the legal cases that are coming up or passed but maybe not adopted yet. So we'll talk a little bit about that as we move forward. So we're here tonight just to give you an update, but I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about what the project originally, what the scope originally was, and it was really to come up with a community vision and look at two specific areas, your large resort area as well as your town center zoning districts, and proceed to go through some public engagement, get some community input, come back with you with proposed changes. So I know that there was some concerns with the large resort, which is probably why I'm here today to talk to you. But I just wanted to talk through and make sure that you understood that it was the two projects there. And really the idea was to get information back, provide some proposed changes to you all, and make some changes to your code that would help assist in those areas. We did go back and look, and I know this was something that has come up in the past, was the resolution 2016-15, and this was really a something for you as the city to say, hey, listen, we need to make sure we have the capacity in order to approve developments coming in. So that was basically stopping development unless it did not impact, didn't negatively impact the system. So anyone that was coming in for additional improvements, including residential homes, were stopped at that point. That's since no longer in place. And for the large resort, and for those looking, it's the area there shown in red. And what I wanted to point out too is the areas that, through the analysis that we did, and it's probably hard to see, but if you look at those areas in blue, those are the ones that are beyond that meet the acreage size in order to have that large residential category. So there's 4 available currently. Now there are some smaller lots kind of on the south side there, but that would need someone to come in and buy up a bunch of property and get to that level in order to make those, to get the additional density. So there's the Burt-Harris Act. This has been, these are kind of some of the regulatory things that we as planners and as cities have to kind of, I always think we have one hand tied behind our back and trying to, lift something heavy while we do this. And it really is something that was put in place to protect development from anything that would come in that would restrict density, intensity, or anything that would impact the overall value of the property. Now, there's a process which goes through. They have to come in with an appraisal and walk through the process, and the city has to review. And then if there's no decision made, then it goes to court. But this has been litigated a number of times in the state. What's new is this Senate Bill 180, and interesting enough, folks were watching it, and it was always something, the bill that went through, and it was basically saying anyone within 100 miles of where landfall was made by a hurricane cannot pass this. Kind of at the last minute, they added all of the hurricanes that we've had over the past year. And all 4 hurricanes, if you look at all of the states of emergency, it's the entire state. So it's every city and town, it's every county. I think cities, your city as well as all cities across the state are really looking at that. And the added thing is that it's proactive. It goes back to July 1st of 2024. So now we have to go back and look and see if there was something there and then make that determination. And it's saying more restrictive and burdensome amendments. So it's amendments, construction, reconstruction. It also does procedures, which was something we were thinking about assisting you with. So it's really something that's kind of been difficult to look at making recommendations, specifically to the areas where you're looking at additional density for the hotels and trying to come up with some regulations moving forward. The best thing right now is that it's not yet law. The governor has not signed it. He, of course, has till July 1st to sign that. I know there's been some advocation. I know Weiss Serota and other attorneys across the state have saying, like, to the legislatures, was this really something that you wanted to do? Was this kind of a broad stroke? Did you want to have the entire state shut down, or is this really something that's focused on certain areas? So we don't know where that's going to go. I think we'll know by the end of June, hopefully, as whether the governor vetoes or There is another legislative session. Maybe they'll come in and make changes. We really don't know at this point, so it's kind of, it's there to look at. It's not really a moratorium, but it really does put some heavy restrictions on what communities can do to make changes in their land development code, in their comp plans, and as well as in your actual processes that you work through. So what you could do, I mean, you could make changes, of course, can't be more restrictive or burdensome. You could also look at additional options, and those could be opt-ins, a transfer of development rights. Someone could give away some of those units to another part of the community. Maybe looking at, I know you're looking at an infrastructure study. I know you're having some concerns with infrastructure. Maybe that might be something that you could look to as something that at least you could get some additional funds from development that comes in and have them pay their fair share when those developments do come in. That's something that you could do. And also, kind of added to the infrastructure is your environmental impact and resiliency. There should be some issues that you could look to kind of have that be, have the community itself be more resilient as storms come in and sea rise is getting higher every year. But what we do want to focus on and we do want to identify is the town center districts. And this was the other area that we looked at. Now, we hadn't started the public engagement. We kind of stopped once we heard that you all wanted to have a discussion with us. So that would be something else that we wanted to, that we would look through as part of this project. And it doesn't really face this, it's the challenges that you have there are a little bit different, right? Coquina West, you've got some issues there with, there's a lot of storm damage. I went through, I hadn't been here since before the storm, so there's some pretty, there's some homes there and some buildings that need some help there. There's some that were non-conforming that potentially can't be rebuilt. So maybe some of that density could be put towards this part of Corey Avenue or other places in the city that you all would deem fit to do. Town center core, again, there's opportunities for redevelopment to kind of be flexible with that, not require a whole block to be done. If you could do it kind of storefront by storefront and have folks make changes as need be. And then Corey Landings, I know you have some items on tonight's agenda, so that's another potential opportunity. So here are all the things. We talked a little bit about those, but you could look at all of these items there. Again, LDRs that are focused on redevelopment. A lot of city codes are, of course, on new development, but we all know that areas have already been developed once, so you really have to think about it kind of as someone coming in and making sure that the regulations read towards developments coming in and not just existing or greenfield parcels that haven't been built on. And then public engagement, I think if we were to move forward, this would be a different process. In the past, it's been successful projects that I've worked in that you have a business meeting, you have to have a one-on-one with them, open to the public, but just focus on the business community and the business owners to kind of get their input. And then sometimes later that day, or you can have a different day where you'd have the general public come in and have conversations about kind of what they want to see. But it's good to have the business meeting first because you kind of get their understanding of where their economics are, what they're looking to do, if they're trying to expand. All of those things are important when you start to look at regulations and how you can make those work. So potential next steps, here's your next steps. So one of the things that I think we're here to look at, the first one is just pause the entire project until you get some more clarity about legislation. The second bullet is really looking at maybe pausing the large resort until you kind of get a good understanding of that is and continue through the town center districts. One of the things we thought about is maybe supporting the needed analysis to do an actual CRA district. Now that's been going back and forth in the legislature, but this year they're still in place. So that's something that you could enact and basically create a tax district where you could take that money and reinvest it into the area. And really focus on those strategies for redevelopment. Also having conversations, if I didn't say, have one-on-ones with you all as the policymakers to make sure that we understand kind of where your direction is moving forward. And we can do that if we don't go forward with the large resort area. So that was it in a nutshell. I can take any questions that you may have, and thank you for the time.
Thank you. Commissioner?
I have a question. I know that with SB 180, and there was also HB 1535 and HB 943, so it seems like that particular language was kind of placed in 3 different areas. So we really, all these cities have a battle against them, against developers, basically.
Correct.
Because those are the ones that are out there lobbying our elected officials up in Tallahassee to get their items pushed through, neglecting residents and home rule. Do you see any sort of organization of cities to fight this?
I know there are communities talking, Shanae, if you want to jump in, you can. I know that Waisorota represents a number of communities throughout the state. Maybe, do you want to respond to that? Would that be?
Sure. Shanae Wood, with Waisorota, as was mentioned. So we've been counseling our municipalities. This is something that really was we'd say a last minute change, and so not many folks were aware of it until now. And so what we've been, we've sent out fine alerts and notifying our municipalities, and so some who have some type of resources, writing networks, we're encouraging them to tap into that. If there's any time at all to make a last minute change, whether it's a veto or something of the sort. But as of right now, it still is, I would say, fresh for some folks, and most organizations like the League, I know the League have been lobbying, other people have been lobbying throughout, and so at this point, it's a matter of, for lack of a better word, tell Mary anything that you have at your disposal in terms of resources to communicate. This would be the last effort to do so. But again, it is fresh at this moment for a number of our municipalities.
So there is no real organization, I would say, against it.
Right. It would be, I think League of Cities usually leads this charge. So the local and then the state delegation does, but it's something that's been passed. So it's, it's kind of, will you reconsider it, in the next, because they have another legislative session quick to come up because they have to pass the budget. So that could be a time where they could potentially reconsider it, but it's all, if, so.
No, they passed a very similar statute in 2022 after Hurricane Ian, correct?
Yes. But
Okay, and the governor signed that one. Okay, so we're not really holding out any hope. I mean, let's just put the cards on the table, right? The reality is that we knew this was going to pass because they've passed it in the past, and they've passed it every year for the last 3 or 4 years, something very similar to this. I don't know that it's necessarily, I'm sure we know which lobby it is, but I think it's just very short-sighted by the legislature to not allow cities in the aftermath of massive hurricanes, which exposed the deficiencies in the buildings and the infrastructure and everything else, to now allow us to make changes as we see necessary to make sure that our cities are more resilient. The Florida League of Cities, while they always talk a good game, and I do love them, they've been ineffective. It's not for lack of trying. And so I really wouldn't expect anything out of that. I guess the question is, maybe you were getting to this. I know, for example, 2 years ago there was a legal challenge to the Form 6. What are options for legal challenges from the cities? Because this seems to be approaching the level of a constitutional crisis, because we're continuously, our home rights and home rule rights are being continuously eroded by the legislature. Right. It's every session we're losing a little bit more. And this is really not a question for you. It's more of a question for our attorney to just contemplate. But I think it's a valid question, because we are seeing the constitutional erosion of our home rule. Every legislative session, it's, 10 things that they're proposing to, erode and supersede what we can do, and then they take 5 back, and we say, well, thank God they took those 5, but we still end up losing 5. And this has been happening every year. So for those of you out in the public, I would say call your senators, call your state legislatures, call your representative. Linda Cheney lives just down the street. Nick DeSigli's right up the other way. Barry's on, so they're, we've got But unless everybody starts getting on the phones and saying, hey, what in the world are you guys thinking here? What are you doing to us, right? We had 2 catastrophic hurricanes, and we can't even make changes to our resiliency as we see necessary. Because somebody in Tallahassee decided they know better how we ought to govern our barrier island. And it's not just us, it's everybody else. As you said, it's the entire state that's affected by this. And last time I checked, Miami wasn't impacted by this hurricane, but they're going to be impacted by the legislature.
Correct.
So, I don't know where you all are on this. I mean, I hate to be the advocate of wait and see, but I think until we find out what happens by July 1st or so, I think it might be worthwhile just putting this on hold for the next 2 months and see what the governor does, see if anything happens in the 3rd legislative session now, and see if anything else materializes. We can hope against hope, but yep.
I do have a question,
Sure.
and I do concur about not waiting as a city for our rights. So I do agree with the mayor on that. But you mentioned putting a pause on, well, we're talking large resort, but pause on large resort, but continue working on the town center. Why could we continue working on the town center? What's the difference? Because are we considering, could we work on CRA, right, which I think is very important, because we can create some form of revenue in the meantime, if possible, before we're not allowed to do that part, because it could happen. And is it the town center because we're not working on things that are less or more restrictive? They will be less restrictive.
Correct. So you have the availability, sorry, that was a hard word to say. You have the ability, the heights here would allow for, right down here where you have restaurants, you could do apartments above or something like that if you wanted to do that. Your CRA could go into that west part of Corey Ave, so you could kind of pull that in and start to do some, infrastructure, other things like that. I think it's more of a what's the potential there versus let's try to reduce the height and the density. So it's a different conversation. But yeah, granted, if we put you'd have to do the test before we would bring anything to you and make sure, say, hey, these are some changes, but these changes are going to assist in the redevelopment. Redevelopment, as you know, is much harder than when you start fresh, right? So there's always some issues there with getting the development, paying for it, demolishing the building, keeping the building, all of those things. And potentially you could have a historic district here too, which would be something that you could look at. If you decided to go the CRA route, that's something that we could discuss and, kind of figure out what we would have available and kind of move that to a different project and come back with a different scope. That's something we could do.
Commissioner Marriott?
Sure. So I just wanted to comment on the town centers 1 and 2 districts, and I think it is important that we don't lose sight of continuing to look at the comprehensive plan regarding those districts. And certainly since the hurricane, I think that's even more important. And I have no problem with pausing till July 1st and figuring out what the scope is and what we're doing. But I don't want us to lose sight of that, because I do know that since the storms, I've talked to some people who on the west end of Corey have some of the smaller motels, and they were, they immediately came to the city and said, okay, this is great. We want the opportunity to lift these buildings or to abandon the first floor and build on the second floor and reopen our motel in a more resilient fashion. But it's currently not zoned for that. And so those people, essentially were left going, well, I can fix this building that's going to flood again, or I can sell it to someone who's going to scrape it and build something else. Those are my only options. And I don't think we want to leave people with that being their only options. And there's another block in the town center district that is all multifamily residential. And those people are also in a position where if their buildings were too damaged to rebuild, to fix, they cannot rebuild multifamily residential on that block, even though that's the only thing that exists on that block. And so I think there are some issues in the town center districts that we do need to take a look at. So I don't want us to lose sight of addressing those issues at some point.
Thank you. Commissioner Robinson?
I'm good with pausing. I just know a little bit of the history on what happened with West Quarry, and some of that change was all due to taking density away from them and moving it to the large resort. So large resort got their bonus and this end got nothing. So that was a little bit of that for them. So yeah, I mean, they still need to get looked at, but I'm all for waiting just to see. It makes a little bit more sense. If we're going to tackle it, we tackle it all at once and get it done, instead of piecemealing it.
Commissioner Mahal?
I'm for all doing it all at once.
Okay. So we have consensus on
Sounds like it.
reviewing this again, first commission meeting in July?
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you so much for your time. I
Thank you,
appreciate
sir.
it. Thank you.
Okay. Are there any amendments to the agenda as proposed?
I did want to mention something on freebie.
Okay.
Don't necessarily want to pull it, but I did want to talk about its term, because as I saw its term originally, it was a 3-year with a 2 1-years, similar to what we are doing on the fireworks contract, but that mutated somehow in the whole realm of things to be 3 years plus 2 years now plus 2 years.
Well, should we just pull it and then we can?
Here, we can pull it and talk about it. There we go. Okay, figure out how that happened.
Okay. All right, so that'll be item 6.
5C. Oh, it's
Yeah,
currently 5.
5C will become item 6B. Why don't we make that 6A,
Thank you. Yes, thank you.
and then make 6A 6B. Commissioner Resnicki?
And then 6B will be 6C. Got a 6B.
I do have a few questions on some of the consent items that I wasn't able to meet. I had too much work. So, but on B, consent B fireworks, on the Be Free LLC, financial services, and some of them could be quick questions, but I mean, maybe someone had some questions too, so I might as well just ask and be quick after. Stantec and Global, Cotton Global, so it's B, C, D, F, and G.
So did you want to pull those items, or you just had some quick questions?
Well, yeah, if we're going to do quick, I guess pull them, right? And ask them, unless you want me to go through and ask questions, but would it make sense?
It's up to you.
Mayor, could I suggest maybe, since there's so many, that we just have questions on the entire consent calendar
Okay.
in order? And then, unless you need lengthy discussion,
Okay, sounds good. All right, any other amendments?
Just items for discussion, if possible, at the end. I wanted to have a short discussion, questions on charter review, conditional use permit process, if you want to call it that way. And that's it. I'll hold the other one for another time.
Okay. All right, any other? Is there a motion to accept the agenda as amended?
I make a motion to approve the amended agenda.
Second?
City Clerk, if you'll please do a roll call.
I was.
Vice Mayor Marriott,
Yes.
Commissioner Robinson,
Yes.
Commissioner Ruznicki,
Yes.
Commissioner Mulholland,
Yes.
and Mayor Petrilla.
Yes. Thank you. Next, we have the Helena Milton Recovery Efforts update.
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. Laura Canary, Community Development Director. So this is going to be the first of now a monthly update, and I just want to remind everyone that maybe has been watching these updates, we will continue to do a snapshot of the permitting intake and those numbers to date, but as you'll see in the next month's presentation, we're going to also start to transition a little bit into the hurricane preparedness. So as whether it's events and planning or things that we're doing just internal to the department, we're going to start to sprinkle that in as well as we enter into hurricane season. So this is very similar to previous updates. We're going to go over the permit numbers to date, damage determinations, appeals, talk about the Pinellas County assistance that's available, and then have just a quick slide on the community development volunteers. So beginning with a snapshot of the permit intake, and this is through 4/27. The permitting department has received 4,074 applications. That's an average daily intake of 228. Our goal is to issue 60 a day. Last check, we're averaging 46 a day. And our daily average for inspections is 87. The breakdown on the right side is what you'll see as it relates to the processing of those permits. So 3,033 have been actually issued. Received, not in review, that 364 means that we need additional information, so it could be going back and forth, but not in an actual review state. And then what you see under other is anything else. That can be an abandoned permit, that can be one that's was maybe denied and reapplied for, so that's kind of those other gray area, if you will, hence the color. And then we've to date closed, or excuse me, through 4/27, 307. One more thing I wanted to mention while I'm on this slide is just looking at the 4,074. Of those applications, 2,623 of those have been owner-builder permits. So we're at about 64% of the permits submitted are owner-builders. And then also, just to kind of put it in comparison for previous years when we didn't have such an influx, when we look at the same time frame from 10/1 of 23 through 4/27/24, we were at 1,570 permits. So just to kind of put it in perspective a little bit. A reminder to anyone that through the May 31st permits, we are at 50% of the cost, so there is still time, and that will be running until the 31st. As we look at the SD determinations, we're very excited to report that our final batch, which was a total of 637, were received. As I said, there was a caveat to that we needed additional information. Ultimately, it was that the final percentages were not calculated in that first batch, so there was some additional information that had to be provided to get to that total tally, and we received that, and so those letters, that final batch, will be going out this week. Once those go out, we feel very comfortable saying that most individuals, if the property was substantially damaged, should have received that determination letter. We just want to say publicly, please, if you feel that your property was substantially damaged and you didn't receive a determination, or you feel that it was an incorrect determination, please reach out to us. Because at this point, once these last batch of letters go out, we do feel that any properties that were deemed substantially damaged should have received the letters. The breakdown of those substantial damage determinations, of the 2,330, 1,513 were non-substantially damaged and 817 were substantially damaged. And then you'll see the breakdown of each of those as commercial and residential.
I have a question.
Yes.
Did all the non-substantially damaged as well get letters?
No.
Do we know what percentage of those folks did not get letters?
So if the property was not deemed to be substantially damaged, a letter did not go out. Of the appeals, through that 4/27 date, there's been 906 appeals submitted. 721 of those have been approved and 185 are in progress. Again, and I know it's not perfect, but to date, none of those appeals have, again, been denied fully, if that makes sense. So at one point, they may have been denied, needing additional information, but to date, none of those have been denied still. Just a reminder that the Pinellas County Hurricane Home Repair Program that is still open for applications, and that is the income eligibility required program. But please visit the website on the bottom of the screen for more information. And they're also, in speaking to the representative there, they also have great assistance available that if you're just not sure, you have a potential cost in mind that maybe you want to question before you go through the application process, they are available to assist. The Pinellas County Recovery Fund, that's the $813 million that's coming through the CDBG disaster recovery funding. They have drafted the action plan, and that is available on the website. There also is an executive summary, so if you don't want to read the whole plan, it has some good information. There also is a presentation available if you go to recover.pinellas.gov. But they had the review of the draft meeting. They had one meeting earlier this afternoon, and then they have another one on Thursday from 6 to 7 p.m., so anyone interested can tune in if they want to check it out live. And last but certainly not least, our community development volunteers are still available Monday through Friday, 9 to 1 p.m. We had a breakfast just to kind of, it's never too soon to say that we really appreciate you and to show some gratitude. And so wanted to thank the commission and all of your leadership for even, having the forethought to put this together with the volunteers and for coming to the breakfast, those of you that were able to make it. As I'm sure you heard straight from the community development staff, they have such a great relationship with these volunteers and are truly so appreciative for how they've been able to just help them through this process. And so it was really nice. And again, thank you, Commissioner Robinson, for working with the businesses and to the businesses that provided some giveaways to the volunteers. Again, we're just so appreciative for that group and just really want to say thank you. And with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Laura.
We do have questions.
Can you explain the appeals process where it goes to the Board of Adjustment? Up to that level? Or we haven't been there yet?
If you could be a little more specific.
Well, the next step after it goes through building official, and if you don't agree with what the finding is, the next step is at the Board of Adjustment, is my understanding per FEMA.
I can confirm. I'm sure you're correct, and that's the next step, but we have not gotten there yet, so I'll have to work that out with the building official as far as what our process will be.
Okay, and then I know we don't like the word phasing, so staging of permits. Can you tell me which permits can be staged?
So my understanding is the trades, essentially mechanical, electrical, plumbing. Those are what can be, split up. But, the example that was provided to me when I asked the question was that you wouldn't want to do a subfloor and flooring on two separate permits, but that, those could be divided under one of the building, so.
What about a kitchen?
You mean?
It'd be in a kitchen being separate than a subfloor or a floor or walls, or, if somebody was doing a kitchen instead.
It would be hard for me to answer that without knowing the total scope of the work, because I think it would be more if that was the only, say, trade represented under that permit for the scope being done in the kitchen, then probably not. But if there was, say, if it was drywall and it was looking to be split up of the kitchen, the drywall in the kitchen versus the drywall in the living room, then no.
Right. No, I meant cabinetry countertops versus the rest of the house, that being a last item.
I don't know the answer to that. When I asked the question, it was basically explained to me that by trade, if you think of it as being broken up by the trade that the work is falling with under.
And then, because I don't know the answer to this, are the city buildings subject to the same open permit FEMA 50% regulations?
Yes, I believe so, yes.
Yeah, because we've gone through this to several of the buildings.
I just want to
where-
make sure we're all concerned about going into the next, and we're just now looking at stuff that we're going to get approved to get
Yep.
work done.
Yes.
That could take 12 weeks, so, okay. Just curious, I wasn't sure if it did or not.
Okay.
Thank you.
Commissioner Marriott?
Thanks, Laura. For anybody who has an open permit and has had their final inspection, but their permit hasn't been closed, can you advise who they should contact or who they should call or how long they should wait? So if somebody's, has had an open permit, they got their final inspection, and it's been 3 days or 7 days or 2 weeks, at what point should they become concerned that they've gotten lost in the shuffle for having their permit closed, before we get into the next hurricane season or various things?
If it's been more than 10 days, they should definitely email permits@stpetebeach.org, and we'll make sure. We're in the process of actually implementing some new systems within our department and in how we use iWork and permits at stpetebeach.org, because as you can imagine, just the influx of emails that we receive every day, we're looking at some internal changes and processy changes on how to better be able to respond and respond quicker. But by all means, if it's been 10 days, then that and it still may be, there may be something additional information, but if they haven't received any notification as to something else is needed or that it's in review, then absolutely, yeah, that would be
Okay.
appropriate.
Perfect, thank you.
Just to follow up with her, her comment about the open permit, because it's not, I've heard this from a lot of residents that are asking me that it is taking, that they've had their final inspection and it's been over 2 weeks. So the ones I've spoken to has been over 2 weeks. But just to not, is it possible for us to find out if you've had your final inspection, again, not to instill fear in people, oh my gosh, we're coming into hurricane season, we still have open permits, but if you have a final inspection, would it be safe to say that that counts as a closure of a permit, but because there's a delay in the city's processing, it shouldn't impact the resident or business, whoever has the open permit? Just, a question to think about, because we'll just be doing appeals, people getting mad, and, is there a way that we can be more proactive so the communication can go out to say it's closed?
Unless there's a legal reason, I know there were some instances when we went into Helene that very case happened, and they did administratively close them because for all intents and purposes, they were done. And it was our administrative process that had slowed it down. But I'm just looking at the city attorney. I don't see any legal reason why. That's our own internal process that we could.
We'll have to take a look into it.
Okay, thank you.
So we'll follow up with you on that. I think it's an important.
And would it be safe to say to do the same for all the SD determination letters that are open permits, that have been appealed, right? And now they're no longer substantial damage, they're non-substantial, but it's still showing open on, the property. And I could vouch that mine is like that right now. Like, I've appealed it, but it's still there.
We'll look at that. That's, again, another internal database cleanup.
I think they use the permitting system to assign them a permit number, but they're not really a permit.
Correct. I'm just worried of technicalities. You still have an open permit,
Well, it's not really a permit, but it's in that system
That's in the
listed under a
system.
permit number.
Okay.
I did want to say in regards to the volunteers, they all expressed the fact that they would love to stay on, even if as things slow down, but they would love to be on call for, God forbid something else happens. But if they're needed elsewhere in another capacity, they would enjoy the opportunity to stay on.
That's wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Okay, next we move on to the consent item.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir? Sorry.
I've been green for,
I kept looking, I've kept seeing it red for some reason, I'm sorry.
I said this previously, I believe it was either at the last meeting or the meeting before when you made the exact same presentation or a similar presentation on appeals. And I hope this is an indictment of Tidal Basin as opposed to anything else, but the fact that we've had 0 appeal rejections is concerning on a potential audit. I just hope we're dotting our I's and crossing our T's on these appeals, and I really hope that it's Tidal Basin and that we're not doing our due diligence, so we're protecting the city as it relates to the potential audit that, or not the potential, but the likely audit that's coming. So I just wanted to make that comment, that nothing's changed in my view on that I think we need to be prepared for that, and we need to be ready to explain that, because it's 185, or I'm sorry, 721 to 0 right now. And that's great. It's great for the community and all that, but what wouldn't be good for the community would be an audit that went sideways for us. So I did want to make that comment once again. Thank you.
I think, as the city manager has mentioned more than one occasion, it's not whether, if, but when inevitably it does come. I think we're, so I guess the question is, for the appeals, is the breakdown primarily here's some pictures, or are there a lot of appraisals? If there were a lot of appraisals, then that certainly would make a lot of sense, considering how many of our homes were homestead in the 70s and 80s and just, never really, that Pinellas County FEMA letter, a lot of them had $100,000, $200,000 when the real number was significantly higher. So I wonder what the breakdown is of, we got an appraisal versus we just provided some pictures because Tidal Basin had your data incorrectly. So I don't know if you have that information or not.
No, but I think what might be helpful that we could definitely share is an example of how we receive the data and what that breakdown looked like. And then one more thing that I think is important to note is when we had recently representatives from FEMA come out to do their technical visit, and we gave them updates on these things, including the amount of appeals. I wish that they said or seemed surprised, based on what they're hearing from other communities as well. But I think what it really boiled down to, my understanding is, at least with the first batch and the majority, because again that was 98% of them total, was that when it went into this software, I know one example in particular, it was like automatically populating a 10%, like across the board. Well, when you kind of add it all up, it's real easy to see how you can quickly exceed that 50% threshold, and it's just not accurate. And it's just a matter of not even really requiring additional documentation, but just really having somebody actually have their eyes on it and see that this does not make sense and change it. And that's what has happened in a lot of these instances. So it hasn't really been that, we need an appraisal in some cases, but for the most part it's been just a matter of having the appropriate eyes on it to be able to say that this is not accurate and this is. And I do think that knowing just again, the importance of dotting our I's and crossing our T's for future purposes, we're making sure of that.
And what has the feedback been when you're speaking with FEMA based on what are they giving you any feedback based on what they've seen us do for the last 6 months?
They seem to think that we're doing, I don't want to say a good job, but everything that we've said, this is how we're handling this, or this is what we did here, or we sent these letters out. Again, it's not perfect. They take a lot of notes and then just kind of nod, and it seems like they're pretty comfortable with the way, no red flags have been thrown up that I'm aware of. Yeah.
And I think I included in one of my recent weeklies that they actually submitted in writing their approval of how we were progressing, and they were happy and did not have any areas of concern. I can't remember their exact words, but so far in writing we've received from FEMA that we are taking the appropriate steps and and how we're progressing through this.
That's good.
And one last thing I think worth noting, this last batch of the assessments was done through Workforce Group, the other third-party contractor, but not the same. And so we, from the beginning, really expressed our concerns, and again, why we're even needing to tap into them and what the issues were with the original. So again, haven't looked through each one of those yet, but hopefully confident that, you know, we're not going to see the same percentage of appeals with this last batch.
Yeah. Thank you.
I also think that even if you get a appraisal, you're still not taking into account any of the inaccuracies in the initial assessment as well. So it doesn't even take in account that. You're just looking at numbers from an actual cash value.
Okay. City Clerk, do we have any general audience comments?
I have no comment card.
Okay. Next, we move on to the consent agenda, and so we'll just take these one at a time. Any questions on the minutes? Any questions on the fireworks contract? That's 5B.
Yes.
Go ahead.
On page 72, and when I say page 72, I'm looking at our packet, so if you're all following along. On page 72, item 9, it mentioned that the completion of the fireworks contract was on July 4th, 2024, and then it would be decided each year by March by the commission, and I believe we're in May, so I'm trying to understand, do we need to make a change on that contract, or you could explain.
I'm assuming that, yes, it probably should have gone in March, but we are bringing it in May. So, yes, we probably do need to make an amendment to the contract that says that we will be bringing it prior to approval of the funds for the fireworks display. Yes.
Okay. That was my only question, so.
We'll make the necessary changes. Thank you.
I'm staying for free.
Okay. Next, we have 5C, freebie.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out that the initial contract for the freebie back in 2019 was a 3-year with 2 one-year options to renew. Very similar to what the fireworks is. And then then when it went back up, it became 2 2-years for some odd reason. In 2022, it optioned out as a year 4 ended up being 2 years. So it went from 2022 to 2024. So originally it was 10, 13, 19 of 19, so that would have been 19, 20, 21, 22. And then it went 22, 23, 24. So it went 2 years. So it, in fact, in 24 it did its 2 one-year extensions. Then it went to a amendment when they were just changing off the addition of adding the 4 vehicles. It didn't extend the term for 2 additional 2 years.
No, just 2 additional years.
Right.
As an exact date, 9/30/2026.
Right. So
Yeah,
it
there were some gaps in there, but
it-
the one we're working with is the last one that we signed on 12/12/23, and they signed on 2/12/24. But that's the last amendment we have, and it extends the term for 2 additional years through 9/30/2026.
So there was an additional year they received out of this contract in general.
That was one of the 2 changes they made. The other one was 4 additional vehicles that now are being removed.
Right. That came up. I just want,
So my understanding, I wasn't here when this happened, but
Yeah.
the reason they probably negotiated this additional year was because they had agreed to buy 4 additional vehicles, which they eventually did not end up buying because of the hurricanes. But yes, the contract expires September of next year, and my plan is to go out to bid for
you.
microtransit services and not bring an automatic renewal, so you'll be able to consider all the bidders and make a decision at that point, well ahead of the expiration of this
I
contract.
think that would be well-served to actually get that RFP out very quickly before the expiration of the contract. I just want to bring that up because that is a concern for that. I mean, it seems that 1 year was just, you know, two 1 years turned into 1 2-year, and then it extended from there, so.
So in addition, we had the advertising and then the non-resident fare, and then we took out the additional $166,000 for those 4 vehicles that we never got. We don't want those anymore, so they're not going to send them, we're not going to charge us for those.
Okay.
So that'll save us $166,708 just from that. And then we have the advertising where we get 50%, and we have the non-resident fare of $3 per person per trip. And that will apply towards the amount that's owed to the contractor. So that'll save us an indeterminate amount of money, but more money.
Commissioner Woznicki?
I kudo Commissioner Robinson, because I did the same thing, was going to ask that. Also, just corrections on, like page 84 has Wayne Saunders' name, so there's, on the one to be signed, has his name on it as interim. It's on page 84.
Okay.
Yep.
And,
We'll definitely correct that.
and then the question with the $3, and I know you've all probably discussed this, and I can't remember, is how does it pay? Is a non-resident paying through an app first before they arrive, and is it credit cards? Like, are credit card fees responsibility of the person using it, or, you know, are we responsible? Or is that part of this contract? Because I don't remember if I saw it, if you all saw it.
It says contractor will charge a $3 fare per person per trip to non-residents of the city of St. Pete Beach. 100% of such non-resident fare revenue, net of any credit card processing fees, will be fully and only applied towards offsetting and subsidizing the total amount owed to contractor by the city as compensation for ride services provided.
Okay, so when it says net of any credit card fees, meaning that the person is paying it, right?
No, the person.
That means it comes out.
So then who, we pay?
And the credit card fee comes off of the balance that's applied to the city's bill. We're paying it.
We can make that more clear, too, instead of using the word net.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, any questions on 5D?
The financial services, yes. I'm sorry.
Sorry, did you have more questions on?
Nope.
Your light was off.
Oh, it's off, but I do have D. I just want to confirm.
Okay.
Is it okay? Oh,
Yeah.
Okay, on D, the financial services agreement with Public Trust CPAs, just want to confirm, originally it was $25,000, then it went up to $50,000, and now we're looking at $75,000? Is it going to go up another $25,000? Or
No.
what do we project?
Yeah, this is the end of the contract, so this is the final payment.
Okay, so on something we thought was going to be 25, it's now 75?
Well, during the emergency, I authorized it under my ability. Then when I knew it was going to exceed, I brought it to extend to 50,000, and it ended up costing the full, well, 75 now to get us through to the final reporting to FEMA, which was March 14th. And we're no longer using the services.
Okay,
as of
I just
that
want to
date.
make sure it was a stacked thing and not two separate. There's 25 here and now it's 70. Okay.
Yes, thank you.
And I had similar, I had my notes down the same, the original. My question is, besides that it's incremental First Amendment, Second Amendment, but on the original agreement, it stated that it was completed, or the service was to be completed on December 31st, 2024. and this was the one signed October 16, 24. Then we had the First Amendment that states that it would be completed September 30th, 25, right? And is this one still September 30th, 2025 to be
No.
completed? It's just done?
It's, the work is done.
Okay. So why do we have that on there?
It's, but I can amend the contract. I mean, well, we can amend the contract so it's clean that it will be, because the last date of service was March 14th,
Okay. Because it does have those various-
2025.
Oh,
Okay,
2025.
we can change that.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just amending the compensation section, not the date. And we'll put in there that the work is complete. We can add that expressly.
Thank you.
Okay, any questions on 5E?
I have one. I just want to make sure. Is the $865,451 part of the 12 million?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, any questions on 5F?
Yes, that, just, and I don't know if you know this answer, how much have we spent on Stantec so far? Does anybody know?
I do not know the answer to that, but it's a lot, and we are making sure we bring every contract now with Stantec to you, whether it's $2,000 or $500,000, because we now have exceeded the $25,000 authority I have with a vendor.
Okay, thank you.
And this vendor is basically our traffic expert.
They do other services as well. If Public Services Director still here?
Up front.
Oh, what else? They're helping us out with a lot, if you can.
That's correct. Yeah, they provide various like civil engineering type services for us, seawall, structural design, as well as transportation.
Okay. Any questions on 5G?
5G was the Cotton Global disaster. Did you have something on that one?
Yeah, because in the amendment, the amount has doubled from the original, on this amendment. So now the funding is, I think it was, we have 150,000 balance. And how are we paying if the reimbursement, right, is not up front, right? We don't have the money first. So this is all general fund, and then we're hoping in 20 years, like, that's...
Hopefully it's not 20. So this is one of those administrative steps we're taking to keep us in a position for FEMA reimbursement. The team has not been authorized to spend this money. What you're authorizing to me is enter into a contract, which then we will only spend as we have the funding available. That's one of the analyses we're going to do. But we wanted to secure the contractor under the purchasing guidelines that FEMA requires.
Right.
And this was the last absolute date we could do it for Milton.
Correct, because it's this week, right?
Yes.
Yeah, pretty sure. Okay.
Okay, any questions on 5H? Okay, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I move to approve the consent agenda.
A second?
City Clerk, if you please do a roll call.
Commissioner Robinson,
Yes.
Commissioner Rosnicki,
Yes.
Commissioner Mulholland,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Marriott,
Yes.
and Mayor Petrilla.
Yes. Okay. Next, we move on to action items. First one is 6A, the variance number 24058.
Mr. Mayor, just to clarify, are we going to vote on this after we hear all the items associated with this, or are we going to vote on this before?
I think the first thing we do is we take a look at the hardship variance, and if the hardship variance passes, we proceed on to items B and 7A.
Also, one other technicality. So the applicant's going to present, well, Brandon's going to open up all three items together, so you're going to kind of get a holistic presentation. Brandon will open it up. The applicant will present their case. And then Brandon will talk about some of the technicalities from a zoning and planning perspective. And then the mayor's correct. You would start voting in order once you hear all items.
And we'll take public comment after Brandon.
Oh, thank you.
They all involve the same project, so in the interest of not having them repeat themselves over and over again, we'll hear the presentations all together. So if the applicant, if you can present all your information about the pools and the variances and the conditional use and the density pool all at the same time.
We have Jack Boziak. He is the architect and the agent for this project. He does have a presentation, so I'll call him up.
Good.
I guess because we're going to take these, why don't I read the title and the ordinances out loud? It may take a minute, but let me do that, just so the public and the record is clear. This first item is 6A, an unnecessary and undue hardship variance number 24058, allowing for encroachment of feature and quiet pools into the required side setback in the development of Windward Pass Resort. Parcel numbers 073216, 07398, 0010170, 073216, 07398, 0010230, 073216181430, 0010010, and parcel 073216, 18143, 0010020. And then item 6B is a resolution of the City Commission of the City of St. Pete Beach, Florida, approving a conditional use permit pursuant to sections 39.6 subsection P and section 42.4 subsections B, D, G, and H of the Land Development Code to allow for the development of a 104-unit condo hotel at 38.8 units per acre within a new 6-story lodging structure that will extend to 50 feet above base flood elevation with non-habitable overrun not to exceed 60 feet above base flood elevation, and include as site amenities outdoor mini golf, quiet and feature pools, a 12-slip Class A lodging dock, include as hotel building, amenities, ground floor and outdoor 6th-floor bars and seating areas, indoor ballroom and restaurant, and including a separate building, an arcade, and 3-level garage with 2nd and 3rd floor outdoor seating areas to property with parcel numbers 073216, 18143, 001, 0010, parcel 073216, 18143, 001, 0020, parcel 073216, 07398, 001, 0170, and parcel 073216, 07398, 001, 0230, incorporating the conditions outlined herein and providing for correction of scrivener's errors and an effective date. And then we'll also hear a presentation on Ordinance 7A, an ordinance of the City of St. Pete Beach, Florida, providing for the allocation of 104 units of temporary lodging density under the provisions of the Town Center Quarry Circle Coquina West Activity Center and the Bayou Residential District's temporary lodging unit density pool, as established in the City of St. Pete Beach Comprehensive Plan, to these parcels with the parcel numbers, again, 073216, 07398, 001, 0170, parcel 073216, 07398, 001, 0230, and parcel 073216, 18143, 001, 0010, and parcel 073216, 18143, 001, 0020, providing for codification, conflicts, severability, correction of scrivener's errors, construction, publication, and an effective date.
Thanks.
I didn't memorize that. Jack Boziak, architect, and I've been before you folks before, and you know I've been on this beach for 55 years. I hate to admit that again. But I'd like to address the city attorney's items kind of one at a time. The first one being the hardship. That I believe, and the reason I'm before you is not to be argumentative and try to tell you guys that, you know, we were wrong somehow, but you have to understand something. One of the primary things is precisely the hardship. And if you look at the reasons that this case was turned down, which I will repeat in a minute, per the planning board ruling, the hardship was never considered. It was turned down for a number of reasons that I think were totally off base. But I will repeat, the biggest hardship on this site, and I know you all have seen it, and it's been in the process with this city for so many years. The property is so unusually shaped that the setbacks that are outlined in the code are basically identified for typically rectangular or relatively regular parcels. This parcel is highly unusual and that should have been considered in their decision. And I'll give you an idea. The parcel is 116,000 square feet due to the, I'm sorry. Oh, okay. I don't know that I can talk and do this at the same time, but I'll try to. Let me see if I can get to a site plan. Is there a better site? Yeah, here you go. The parcel is 116,740 square feet. It's hard to believe, but because of this unusual shape, where the site goes from 293 feet on one end to a very narrow width of 125 feet down, where you see that parking lot towards the far end of the thing. You can see the unusual shape. When you apply the setbacks in the criteria, the site is less than 50% buildable. And I could find no other site in the city of St. Petersburg Beach, in St. Pete Beach, that were so unduly restricted by the setbacks, where the configuration of the site was not taken into account. To further complicate that, if you look and see in that dotted line through the middle to the right of those parking spaces, that's a 25-foot easement for drainage. And that's not counted in the area that you can't build on in my figures. So actually less than, or approximately 40% of this site is buildable. And if that's not a hardship in application of the regulations, I really don't know what one is. But in the outline of the reasons that we were turned down, the outline stated traffic study, which was not required at that time, traffic density, same as traffic study, the overall density use, which was mainly objected to by the residents that appeared that live the 6 houses that are across the waterway from us. The next thing was crazy, increased freebie use. Is that a relevant thing to consider? The docks and the shallow waterway. That really has nothing to do with the zoning application. Jaywalking. I once again am not sure that's something that everybody on the beach doesn't have an issue with. And noise from the pools and the dining and balconies. To me, the planning board did not consider properly the biggest single aspect, which is the shape and usability of the property. That's what forced us to go to a 5-story building. It is not that we were trying to abuse the site or take advantage of anything. I think that I am here to either properly have this thing considered, because the conditions that were acted as their concerns in their listed report, to me, none of them are applicable to what we were presenting, and I don't think the site was given proper consideration. I would defy you to find any site in the city of St. Pete that has gone under consideration for planning and zoning approval where 40% of the site was available for construction due to these excessive setbacks. And when I say excessive, the 295 feet on this end, that's the biggest end of the site, and that's where 65 feet wide had to come out. That's just unreasonable, and it's unheard of. I think that it was not properly considered, and you'll find no place in the report where the unusual shape and unusual buildability, if that's a word, of the site is under consideration. That's what I think the planning board should have addressed, and I mentioned that night, and it came to no avail. That's the hardship, I believe. You know, and I'd be glad to challenge anybody finding a site this challenged.
Sir, how long has the owner owned all these properties? Because I think it's 4 properties, is that correct?
I think there are actually 4 or 5 lots, yeah. Beth has owned the properties for, I think, around 20 years. I know I've worked on them for 15.
So did the easement and the setbacks not exist when she purchased the properties?
Well, there were buildings on the site that were not affected by the setbacks. And,
So she's changed her plan, or?
Well, no, the buildings were on there just like any other site.
The previous buildings?
Yeah, there was an old restaurant, there was
Right, and
the property
now.
was totally underutilized.
Right, and now essentially you want to turn it into one property.
Well, it's been one property. It was I think it was actually 2 parcels. There was a restaurant on one, there was a hotel, it might have been a 3rd property involved in the purchase.
So you'd mentioned the drainage easement being a particular issue, and I see it. I think it's next to the south side of the parking garage, is that correct?
Yes, it is, yeah.
So was that there when she purchased the property?
I'm not sure, but I believe it may have been. I can't give you a definitive answer on that. She may have granted that. I can find that answer, but
It's just,
I'm prepared.
I'd be curious to know because, generally those easements are there for a long period of time, and most people, when they buy a property, they, see what there is for easements and how it may impact their usage, or whatever their planned usage is. So I'm not sure that the easement is something that we should, if it existed when she bought it, that we should necessarily feel sympathetic about.
Well, then deduct that.
As you characterized it.
Yeah, deduct that. And we're still at 50% of the property is unusable because of easements, of setbacks, excuse me. And it's an unusually high situation. And I think we tried to emphasize the shape of the site as being a major factor. And it wasn't like we were coming out trying to build a 50-unit. It's basically broken into 2 sites. The bottleneck in the middle goes down. It goes from, it's so unusual. It's 295, excuse me, on the, let me just get that property size right. I'm sorry, I turned the page. It is 293 feet on the right-hand section, which is the south property line. It's 125 feet at the bow tie portion, and then it's 165 feet on the far end. So the configuration of the site, to me, the planning board, forget about the easement, that's part of what broke the site up, and the planning board could and should have taken into consideration not the traffic study was not that, the freebie use, the docks, the jaywalking. I mean, that's 3 of your 5 comments. The noise from the pools, noise from the pools is a factor on any of the hotels, that the noise regulations are there to protect the city from that, and the hours of operation that we've submitted did not allow nighttime use. So I think we attempted to be good citizens on that and properly develop the property, but if you forget about the easement, the property is less than 50% usable.
When you say nighttime use, I assume you mean after 10 p.m.?
Well, no, they basically had said nighttime use, and we had set up hours that were, within a reasonable guideline of the city regulations.
You had shown some photos up there. Could you go back?
Yeah, sure.
There was a photo that showed, it was, actually, there you go.
This.
So, yeah, that would do right there.
All right.
That's perfect. Do you happen to know how wide that canal is at that point where the building construction would be?
It's pretty
from the R1 residences that are right across the bayou there?
Well, I can tell you that that property, the longest property line on our site is 200 and, what did I say, 293 feet. And that, if you can see where the cluster of green trees are, you can see where the bayou there is wider than that, so it's got to be in excess of 300 feet.
300 feet?
Yeah, in excess
So you
of
think the bayou is 300 feet across?
Well, if the property is 293, it's at least that wide going by,
Right.
if you look at it.
So, and I think you propose to have 2 bars on this property, is that right?
Well, we had a rooftop and actually, the other bar was at the pool area, yeah.
The Quiet Pool?
Quiet.
Interesting name.
Well,
You're
Quiet,
going to have a bar, but you call it Quiet Pool.
well, it's only a small indoor bar, and it was an adult-only bar. It was-
So
or
will there be amplified music at both bars or just the rooftop
No,
bar?
we were not planning on providing music. We planned on providing music on the upper level of the rooftop.
Which is probably going to be 350 to 375 feet across open water to those residences across the way?
Yes,
Would that be accurate?
yes.
Would you want to live there?
As a matter of fact, I did live there for
You did?
3
Okay.
years. And you can tell me about how narrow the canal is coming out, and I experienced that with my Mako when I came out of there to fish, and days and nights. So yes, I did live there, and when they were building the major hotels across the street, I understood that there were land uses and planning, and in the best interest of the city, there are uses that should be taken into account. I didn't think that the objections of single-family residents that bought across the canal from the busy St. Petersburg beach, St. Pete Beach, would be a major consideration.
Right, but I believe the district that you're proposing to build a relatively large hotel in is considered the Bayou Residential
Yes.
District. That's different than the large resort district that typically faces west when you're talking about rooftop bars and amplified music. Would you not agree with that?
I don't totally agree because it exists already in locations.
Does that make it right? Does that make it
Pardon me?
right, sir?
Well, if we make the does that make it right argument, can I make that on a couple things? Does it make it right to deny, consideration of the proper, the proper rulings and the proper zoning issues? Or do you take things like freebie use as being a reason to deny this? I'd like to know application of the proper considerations to me is a major portion.
Mr. Boziak, let's, per your request, let's stick to the undue hardship variance, and then we can discuss the merits of the CUP.
Yeah, sure.
Should it go beyond that? Would the commissioners be opposed to that? So let's stick with the hardship. So, Commissioner Mulholland, since you still have the floor, do you have any questions on the hardship? Any comments on that or questions?
As the hardship, as it relates to, I don't have that in front of me, but I think the request is for side setback variance that grants a 51% reduction in the variance requirement, I think.
We can have Brandon go through the criteria for variances if you want to go one at a time. Maybe you'll hear the criteria and then you can discuss.
I think
I thought we were going to do the whole project all at once, but it sounds like we're going to do the variance first.
let's start with the first item. you know, if that moves forward, then we can move forward. If that doesn't move forward, there's no point, there's
Okay.
nothing else to go on to, right?
Do you want to call Brandon up to go through the criteria?
Sure.
Okay.
So I had a consolidated presentation, Brendan Berry, senior planner. But talking about the variance criteria, I wanted to specify this is only for the pool setbacks. The building, the primary development does meet the required setbacks, so denial of the variance would not prevent the remainder of the project from moving forward should the commission wish to take action on that portion of it. Staff does recognize the challenge in the aspect of the site. It is very wide. There's a lot of variation in the depth of the site throughout the property. Consolidation of property is something that the city comprehensive plan does support, specifically in this district. It's even recognized in this zoning and in the future land use category that there is challenges related to the aspect of these properties in particular. That being said, these are accessory features for the property. These are pools. They're not the primary building. The applicant can still develop, subject to resolution and ordinance approval, a lodging facility at this property without the variances in place. I will say there is a ubiquity to the quiet type of pool. I understand the concerns about the music, but that is a separate consideration, and that's actually a separate conditional use permit under this scope is the outdoor music at this property. The pool itself is something that resorts tend to have. I do understand the challenges that the applicant faces related to the aspect. The feature pool, staff did have some concerns about just, especially late night operations. There were conditions that we recommended under the resolution, should that feature be approved and the development be approved in tandem. But it's the quiet pool, I do feel that the applicant has provided some reasonable support for the feature pool. We just had greater concerns related to the operation and the potential nuisance of that feature late at night. We've added conditions, but if those are not adequate to the commission, we would ask that action be taken separately for the quiet pool. You happy to answer any questions?
I have some.
Sure.
And this is a question for you, Brendan, because I am utterly confused as to how this can come to the commission. If this is a Bayou residential district, primary use for a Bayou residential is residential. Secondary use is limited commercial, okay? There are 4 separate lots with 4 separate tax base, right? Property taxes. At what point did this city unify these properties that you verbally are telling us that whether they eliminate the pool, they can still go on with this project? Doesn't unifying these lots have to come to commission?
So the resolution and the conditional use permit are one and the same tonight. They're both the same action. And then the ordinance is for the allocation of density units. Those are all subject to review by the city commission. You have the ability to approve the project overall. You have the ability to review independently the units being requested to allocate to the property. And then you have the variance, which is solely for the pool setback. There is nothing in the comprehensive plan or the land development code that prevents property owners from consolidating properties and developing them with a permitted use. What's under review tonight is not a permitted use, it's conditional use. So if they had chose to move forward with a permitted use, they would be able to consolidate these properties. Multifamily, for example, a mixed-use multifamily is a permitted use of this property. So they could take that option of consolidating. Depending on how they do that, they might need to go forward for a subdivision. That is something that would come before the commission. If they bound it through a covenant or a unity of title, those typically do not come forward to the commission for that action. But in this case, because there's a development project before you that requires a conditional use permit with density pool allocation, you have review powers over the scope of this project.
So therefore, if they were to change this project, then it would be a completely different use, you know, because I can answer your question is that there is no hardship because you have 4 separate lots and we're trying to bring a commercial entity, primary commercial entity, into a residential community. There is no other property similar to this property in this area. There's none, 0 in this district. In this application, we're comparing apples to oranges. We're mentioning boutique hotel district. We're insinuating there are others out there, but there's none. Samora is the only other hotel in the area, which is nowhere in the width of this property, nowhere, okay? And that particular property has had countless problems in the neighborhood, and, to think that this can come forward, knowing the amount of issues that we've had already, not only in Bella Vista, Don Cesar neighborhood, and across the street with noise, traffic, the lot itself, in the condition that it is currently, has had numerous issues. I'll leave it at there, but I have 5 pages of reasons to give you as to why this shouldn't go forward.
Commissioner Robinson?
I have a question, Brandon. To your knowledge, how often does the city grant an encroachment request of 51.5%?
Of this magnitude, it's not very frequent. We don't typically see requests like this with this degree of property consolidation.
And that pool could be moved elsewhere.
Yes.
It's all about design. And if they choose not to do the pool, they could still come up here and try to get a variance to move that setback for the building to be there. And we could still say no or yes or whatever. But very uncommon to see a 51.5%. And I know that it's very hard for residents to get anything on pools here, on variances in general, let alone a 51.5% would be crazy. Thank you.
Do you know how many units are in this particular district? Parcels, tax ID numbers, roughly?
Not exactly, no.
Okay. Just on a yes and no basis, are the setback requirements for this property different from other properties in this district?
Yes.
How so?
Significantly. Unlike other districts in the city, for example, some of the districts that the commission has recently reviewed projects under, they have a cap to the side setback, so there is
Talking about other parcels in this same district?
Yes, well, so the percentage is the same. It's 10% of the lot width, but because of the consolidation of the property, the actual setback is significantly greater, yes.
Okay. So is it the same as every other property in this district?
It's 10% for all properties on the side, yes.
So we're not imposing anything differently on this parcel than any other parcel that's in this district?
That's the flat 10%, yes.
Okay. If they just wanted to build something by right, what could they build?
In terms of a primary use of the site?
Well, we keep hearing that they can't build on half the property, and so what can they build? How many units? What height?
So lodging is entirely subject to conditional use, so this type of development would not be permitted without a conditional use. In terms of a similarly sized development of a similar scope, multifamily mixed use is a permitted use at this property. It would not need to go through a conditional use. Provided that it's mixed use, they would be permitted 18 residential units per acre, not subject to any kind of density pool. That would be a base permitted density.
Okay. So when we're talking condo-tels here, right, that's technically residential, but it's kind of a skirting around the issue that it's actually really operating as a hotel disguised as a residential structure, right?
The city does classify it as temporary lodging. It's a different ownership scheme, of course, than a hotel or motel, but it's treated the same in terms of length of stay and other requirements.
Yeah. So really what we're asking for here is to build a hotel, not condos, not apartments, not anything residential.
I believe they'd be condo ownership, but they would be temporary lodging. They would be treated the same as hotels, yes.
Okay. So would they be subject to the same short-term rental restrictions that a normal residence would be, or would they be daily, weekly,
They would be the opposite. They would be prohibited from rentals of greater than 1 month, so they would be on the other side, maximum 1 month rentals.
That's if they do the lodging.
Correct, correct.
If they're multifamily units,
They incorporate as a condo hotel.
they get 49 multifamily units as a right, they'd be prohibited from renting
Okay.
for less than 30 days.
So they're subject to the same setbacks and restrictions as every other parcel in this district, right? They're not asked to do anything different. Now, they may want to do something different, but wanting something and not being able to is not the same thing as having a real hardship, right? The hardship, if I'm looking at a hardship, you know, it's an undue burden, right? It's you being subjected to something that no one else has to endure, you know? So I'm, reading through their application, a lot of it was, with all due respect, sir, it was a lot of I feel, I believe, I think, rather than providing concrete evidence of a hardship. The fact that you want to do something that isn't there by right, that's all it is. It's just something that isn't there. It doesn't constitute an undue hardship. It doesn't, I understand that doing it this way certainly, it extracts more value from the property than if you did just what you're, entitled to. But our responsibility is to look and see, is there a hardship? Is there something that's required of this property that isn't of the neighbors, that you're subjected in some way to something more strenuous, something more restrictive than any other parcel in this district? And that doesn't seem to be the case. Our responsibility is to treat all parcels and owners fairly and equally. And so by granting this, we actually would be treating you more favorably than anybody else, rather than equally and impartially. But that's my opinion.
Mr. Berry, what in this package has changed since the planning board? I watched participated in the planning board meeting, and in reading the documents, it looked like the exact same presentation. Has there been some modifications since then, some compromises since then, or has it basically just been, we feel the planning board didn't necessarily consider all the appropriate facts?
Well, it's not a staff determination. The applicant has the right to move their application forward. We did speak a month or two ago before resubmittal and discussed going back to planning board. They had made one modification, which was reducing the height of the building from, it had been the maximum height, it was reduced down to 50. And we had discussed going back, and they decided to move the case on to the city commission for action. In this case, the planning board is a recommending body. That was the major change. I understand, I spoke to the applicant earlier. He had modified the setback for the feature pool specifically in the scope of the variance. And I believe he had a diagram discussing that. It wasn't in the presentation that was shown on the screen. I believe the reduction was to 55 feet, if I remember correctly, but he could speak to that. It would still require a variance. It would still be an encroachment of 10 feet for that pool. But those were the two major changes to the scope of the project. Staff had added one recommended condition, which I'll talk about when we get to the resolution.
So other than a minor height adjustment, there's been really no, what you'd call material changes from what was presented to the planning board?
Correct. Yes.
Thank you.
Commissioner Marriott?
Yeah, I have a question for our city attorney, I think is who the question would be for. In considering a hardship variance, part of the consideration is what the use is going to be, correct? Or should the consideration of the variance be independent of what they're going to do with it? In other words, if somebody says, this is an unusual lot, and the side setbacks and the front setback make a large portion of the lot not buildable. So I would like a variance from those setbacks, and then I'm going to decide what my project is going to be. Is that a way to apply for a variance, or is part of the consideration of the variance based on what's going to be put within those setbacks?
I'll go through the criteria, but before I go through the criteria, typically, if you're going to design, you want to design a project to fit within the land development code. So if there's setbacks, you build a building of a certain size, and if you want to have a pool, you take area away from the building for the pool. Or you put the pool inside the building, or you put it somewhere where you can fit it, or you build a smaller pool. So this one has two pools, an activity pool and a quiet.
Yeah, I understand that, but I mean, you know, I think that there is some truth to the fact that this is an odd lot, right? This is a little bit of an odd shaped and you know, an odd shaped lot, and with the setbacks we have, it does reduce the amount of buildable area. So my question is, if somebody just came to us and said, I would want to build something on this lot, but I would like to be able to use 70% of the lot instead of 50% of the lot, will you give me a variance? Is part of the requirement of applying for the variance saying what you're going to do on that lot?
So in law school, the typical example that they give you, the hypothetical, when a variance should be granted, is if instead of a rectangular lot, you have a triangle lot, and you have 50-foot setbacks on each corner, each part of the triangle, that leaves you no area to build. So you cannot use the property for the purpose that it's zoned. You can't build a house in there, or you can't build a hotel in there. Then you would get a variance from those dimensional setbacks. This is a dimensional request. So if there's no way to build a pool within this area without the variance, that's a pool. It's not the primary use, which is the hotel. But the criteria that we have that might be applicable is that hardship can't be self-created. There's no self-created hardships. For variances, the special conditions and circumstances do not result from the actions of the applicant or the prior owner of the property. Special conditions and circumstances exist which are peculiar to the land, structure, or building involved, and which are not applicable to other land, structures, or buildings in the same zoning district. So it could be the land, it could be the structure, or the building involved. In this case, they're asking for a variance for the pools, not for the buildings. 3, literal interpretation of the provision of the Land Development Code deprives the applicant of rights commonly enjoyed by other property owners in the same zoning district under the terms of the Land Development Code, and results in an unnecessary and undue hardship on the applicant. The hardship has not been deliberately or knowingly created or suffered to establish a use or structure which is not otherwise consistent with the comprehensive plan or the Land Development Code, nor will it permit an increase in development density. An applicant's desire or ability to achieve greater financial return or maximum financial return from his property does not constitute a hardship. Granting the variance application conveys the same treatment to the applicant as to the owner of other lands, buildings, or structures in the same zoning district. The requested variance is the minimum variance that makes possible the reasonable use of land, building, or structure. And the requested variance is in harmony with the general intent and purpose of the Comprehensive Plan and Land Development Code, is not injurious to the neighborhood or otherwise detrimental to the public safety and welfare, is compatible with the neighborhood, and will not substantially diminish or impair property values in the neighborhood. And these are, if you want to look at them in writing while you're talking about them, they're on page 698, 699, and 700 of the packet.
And then if somebody was wanting to build, say they were building condos or something on this lot that was absolutely allowed by right in density and height and use and all those things, where they weren't having to come ask us for permission for anything, but they wanted to put in a pool that encroached into the setback, would that come before us, or would that come before the Board of Adjustment?
So if they had as-of-right development, and they maxed out the 49 multifamily units, and they had a pool, and they needed the variance, and it didn't need a conditional use, it would go to the Board of Adjustment. But they're asking for 104 units. I think originally at 54 feet, they had to come for the height for conditional use, but they took that down to 50. But they're here for the conditional use because they want to allow, to use them for a condo hotel, for lodging, for short term, which they can't do unless they have a conditional use. And they also want outdoor music.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Woznicki?
City Attorney, I mean, as you're reading the Land Development Code in the section, going one by one, number one, special conditions and circumstances exist, right? Nothing exists. There are 4 separate lots, okay? The hardship that you're claiming is that because you're combining these 4, now you've got an odd lot. But the fact is that there's 4 tax bases, okay? And there are 4 separate lots. Number 1, failed.
That would be
2,
self-imposed, wouldn't it?
if they combine them?
Yes.
Correct, but they're not combined,
Well, I'm
right?
saying one of the criteria is the condition can't be self-imposed.
Correct, so they're self-imposing, is what I'm saying. So, fail. 2, the special conditions and circumstances do not result from the actions of the applicant or the owner. Well, we just said it failed because they're combining it. 3, literal interpretation of the provisions of the Land Development Code deprives the applicant of the rights commonly enjoyed by all other properties in the same zoning district under the terms of the Land Development Code. It doesn't exist, you know? Samora is unique, it's different, you know, and we're not here talking about that hotel. Doesn't look nothing to what is proposed here. 4, the hardship has not been deliberately or knowingly created or suffered to establish to use. I guess they're creating it, okay? It doesn't exist. An applicant's desire or ability to achieve greater financial return, well, I would question that because that particular question in the application was very vague. It was acknowledged. We still have no financial analysis. Why not just build the 4 lots separately to what it was prior? Why are we creating something different now? Is it because of more financial return? Don't know. Big question mark. 6, granting the variance application conveys the same treatment to the applicant as every other owner. We are treating you the same as others, right? There is no hardship right now in that lot. You could build 4 separate or combine and build accordingly to the zone residential. The requested variance is the minimum variance that makes possible the reasonable use of the land, building, or structure. Again, you're creating it. The pool's not necessary. You have 65 setback because you're combining them, okay? And putting them towards a condominium, a so-called quiet pool, and a slide, you know, so, you know, how are you going to keep that quiet? I mean, it will echo across the waterway. 8, the requested variance is in harmony with the general intent. Do you know how many emails I've received? How many videos I've received? There is no harmony, okay? You know, that's 8 just there, and again, I have 5 pages, so I don't see the hardship. Thank you.
Do we have any audience comments?
Yes, John Kurzman would like to speak on 6A and 6D.
If you'll please state your name and address for the record.
John Kurzman, Be on the Way. I'm not going to beat this up. Just really is more for understanding for the noise ordinance or other things. I've never heard of a quiet pool before, and I know that we've been concerned about noise in pools. So I'm just, you know, wondering, is that a pool that, like, you know, flowers float through, or, like, you know, people aren't allowed to swim in it? What is a quiet pool, and how would you enforce that? That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay. City Attorney, is now the appropriate time to take action on item 6A?
You can.
Okay. Is there a motion for 6A, please?
I motion to deny variance 24058.
Is there a second?
I second.
City Clerk, If you'll please call roll.
Commissioner Rosnicki,
Yes.
Commissioner Mulholland,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Marriott,
Yes.
Commissioner Robinson,
Yes.
and Mayor Petrillo.
Yes. Thank you. Next, we move on to item 6B,
Thank you for your consideration. All right.
which is still part of your, this is the rest of the conditional use application. 6B is consideration of resolution 2024-12. Mr. City Attorney, you already read this lengthy.
Yep, I read the resolution into the record. You can begin the item.
Okay.
I don't know if the applicant or staff wants to go first.
Staff can start with this item if we could pull up the third presentation. So a lot of these items have already been addressed. There we go. So I will go through this quickly. The applicant is Jack Boziak, architect for Sungold LLC, the property owner of the 4 parcels under consideration for these requests. Two of the requests are linked together. They are relying on one another. The first is Ordinance 2024-08. That is the density pool allocation that is requested for the 104 temporary lodging units. Those would be allocated from the Town Center, Quarry Circle, and Coquina West Activity Center and Bioresidential District Density Pool. Second linked item is Resolution 2024-12. This is the actual conditional use permit itself. This would be permission to construct the 104-unit, 50-foot tall condo hotel. It would contain indoor and outdoor amenities that include first and sixth floor outdoor bars with outdoor music, 12 Class A, which are lodging, dock slips, hosting commercial water sports amenities, and other accessory commercial amenities. The variance, which was not necessary for the other items to move forward, it concerned the feature and the quiet pools, was just denied. So here's the timeline. This was submitted back in September 2023. It was revised a number of times. It did go to the planning board back in December, where it was recommended for denial at a vote of 5-0 to the city commission. The applicant has already addressed that with the commission. Here's a list of exhibits. Property has a zoning of bioresidential, as was mentioned previously. This is described in the city's comprehensive plan as a transitional district from the higher intensity commercial district to the west to the lower intensity residential districts to the east. The first request is the ordinance. This is specifically the density pool allocation. Up until 2012, these properties had a zoning of RFM, Resort Facilities Medium. At that time, lodging was a permitted use by right. It allows for lodging developments of up to 50 feet in height as a permitted use. That was changed. It was increased in density to up to 40 lodging units per acre, increased 4 feet in height. But the entire density pool allocation and the temporary use itself, or temporary lodging use itself, is now only permitted with a conditional use permit. So regardless of the density of this project, if it were to be approved for a a condo hotel, it would need to come forward to the commission for a conditional use. All of the units subject to this request must be allocated from the TC2 ACN Bioresidential District Density Pool. This pool originally had a unit count of 325. There are currently 261 units remaining in the pool. Those 64 units were allocated entirely to Hotel Zamora. The first allocation was for 50 units back in 2013. Another 14 were allocated in 2020. Were this request to be approved for the entire density that is requested, there would be approximately 50% of the units remaining in the pool, 157. The remainder would be allocated, of course, to this project and Hotel Zamora. Moving on to the conditional use permit request, this is the actual construction, the actual development of this site. So it would include the actual development of the lodging use itself with those 104 units. These are not additional to the density pool allocation. Those are the 104 that would be allocated from the density pool under the ordinance. They're requesting a lodging building of 50 feet in height, as was mentioned before. This was revised from the December hearing last year. It would have removed it as one of the conditional use permit criteria. However, the density does exceed what is allowed by right without a planning board hearing, so nothing has changed in that regard. Separate from the lodging development is a separate conditional use permit request for 12 Class A, which are lodging dock slips. These are classified as a conditional use permit under the Bioresidential District regulations. They would offer non-motorized commercial water sports, being pedal boats and paddle boards. Those are also an additional accessory conditional use permit. And as mentioned before, the first and sixth floor bars with outdoor music, those are a separate conditional use permit as well. There would be accessory amenities to the hotel, condo hotel, if the condo hotel were to be permitted. The mini golf course, arcade game room, and quiet and feature waterslide pools, independent of variances, would fall under the allowable commercial component of the conditional use permit hotel. So just showing across the site these standalone requests, starting at the south side of the site, which is the right side of the slide. You have the first floor bar. The applicant did clarify this would not have outdoor music, so that would be an allowed accessory use. Looking to the back of the site, they are proposing those 12 wet slips with Class A lodging docks. The hotel itself, the primary building, is a 104-unit condo hotel building. It's 50 feet in height. It's 6 stories, 5 of which are habitable. That is a conditional use permit as well. And then on the north side, you have the 6th floor bar with outdoor music. The accessory structure request, which again would fall under the condo hotel development, starting from the south end, you have the quiet and feature pools. They would need to be brought in to meet the setback, as the variance was just denied, and you can see that setback line that subsumes most of the quiet pool, about half of the feature pool. In the structure itself, you have an indoor restaurant that is not a conditional use permit. That would be an allowed accessory use of the hotel. The same for the standalone parking garage. That's a 3-floor garage on the north side of the site. That would have an indoor arcade. It would have outdoor seating, but there would not be outdoor music. So that would be an allowed accessory use. And then you would have a mini golf course as a commercial use, again allowed under the hotel at the very northern end of the site. As mentioned before, I won't belabor the point. The planning board met to review this case in December. It was recommended denial at a vote of 5-0. There are cases in which the planning board sits as a local planning agency. They make consistency findings with the comprehensive plan for future land use map amendments, land development code, and comprehensive plan changes. In this case, they are a recommending body, so the applicant had the ability to move on to the city commission. Denial was based on some of the items that were brought up before. Lack of traffic study, concerns about increase in traffic density, the overall density of the development, the use of features by residents, concerns about increased freebie use and cost, the waterway shallowness at the narrow end of the waterway, concerns about access from this project over to the beach, jaywalking and public safety, cumulative noise from pools, dining, and balconies was brought up as another concern by the planning board in their recommendation of denial. The variance has already been reviewed, so I will not cover it. Staff, in reviewing this request, did find there to be some benefits for consideration. The first is the provision of a public promenade. These are features that are recommended in the city's comprehensive plan, in the Gulf Boulevard Redevelopment District, as well as generally throughout the districts of the Gulf Boulevard Redevelopment District, of which the bioresidential is a part. It does increase water access. It would be a feature that is maintained with the development, and it's featured around the outside of this project. Property consolidation and curb cut reduction, that is not something that the applicant has actively undertaken, and it is something that would be required should this development move forward, whether through this scope or any other kind of development that permits a property consolidation. That is something that is directly promoted in the bioresidential district under the purpose and intent. The city does promote property consolidation due in part due to the uniqueness of these properties and their aspect. Another benefit, something that came out of the city's recent comprehensive plan amendments, is that we now support the Vision Zero initiative to reduce and eliminate traffic deaths and serious injuries along Gulf Boulevard. Of course, we have unfortunately experienced some deaths and serious injuries in the last years. Reducing the curb cuts to these properties, that's a benefit that you would get through curb cut reduction. There is not a need for each of these standalone parcels to have a curb cut. It would be reduced down to the 2 that the applicant is proposing. Not necessarily something that's related to the conditional use permit. There are uses that could be supported with the consolidated property, but that curb cut reduction would be a benefit, and it is something that is promoted through the county's Vision Zero strategies as well as through our land development code. Staff did find the quality of the architecture to be high, particularly for the garage. I felt that they did do a good job screening the purpose of that garage on the north side. I felt that the development of the property and the architecture, both of the buildings relative to themselves and across the property, did reflect a relatively high quality coastal art modern style. I felt that the applicant did a good job with the architecture in the project, which is, again, one of those policies that is supported in the bioresidential district. They have limited the intensity of the waterfront functions. This is a significant reduction from what was presented at the community meeting. I believe they were proposing something in the realm of 28 to 30 slips. Now, all of those slips are conditional use permits independent of this approval. There is nothing that allocates any number of slips to this development. However, under a different redevelopment scenario, a residential redevelopment scenario, there could be by right more slips at this property than what is being proposed here. So that is a limited intensity concern relative to a possible permitted use of the property. There are family-oriented amenities, which staff frequently hears there is a deficit of in this area. And the applicant has increased public amenities and landscaping above the minimum code requirements. Remaining concerns apply to the mass of the building. This was brought up at the planning board and nothing has changed in that regard. The mass of the building has not changed. Understanding the concerns about the aspect of the site, our consultant reviewer did have concerns about the overall scale of the building relative to other developments in the area. You can see, and this was a graphic out of the staff report, comparison with some of the adjacent developments. Granted, this is a consolidation of multiple properties. There is nothing else like this in this district, but the other adjacent developments do not have the mass and the scale of this development. Staff had some interior access concerns related to vehicle circulation. This is something we feel could be adequately addressed at the site plan stage. Concerns about perpetual promenade maintenance, which was made a condition should this use be approved. And concerns about transportation management plan strategies. We have not received a traffic study or a transportation management plan. That is something that could be provided at the site plan if the use were to be approved. So if the project is found consistent with the comprehensive plan, if the adequate conditions that are recommended are applied, the density pool is a case-by-case. The conditional use, as with all the others that you've seen in the recent years, must be evaluated on the basis of the 20 criteria. But with the density pool, you do have additional review powers related to some of the provisions of the project, other concerns related to the comprehensive plan that are outlined in the criteria. I did also want to reiterate that individual conditional use permit criteria within this request can be considered by the City Commission. It's not an all or none if there are certain uses that you support, others that you do not, or have concerns about that need additional conditions. You can propose those for the lodging development, the Class A docks with the commercial water amenities, the outdoor bars and music. Nothing has changed since the planning board on the staff side except for one added condition. The applicant has not provided a traffic study. Based on staff estimates, I'm not a transportation engineer. I do find through the transportation manual that it's expected that this project will produce fewer than the 49 trips. That is the minimum threshold adopted through our comprehensive plan for staff consideration of a traffic study. However, we would like to consult with a professional transportation consultant should this use move on to the site plan stage. If the consultant finds that this project may produce 51 or more peak hour trips, we would ask that the applicant prepare a full traffic study at that time, and that would be the basis for any concurrency approval that is issued for this development. I did speak to the applicant in advance of this hearing. I understand that they are agreeable to this condition. And I'm just going to summarize the conditions. I'd be happy to go through them if the commission would like, but you have seen many of these conditions before on other projects, that they provide a wider sidewalk, make frontage safety improvements in line with the Gulf Boulevard safety study, provide a minimum percentage of Florida-friendly landscaping, reduce impervious surfaces where permitted at the site plan stage, and provide green or cool roofs. Limit nighttime hours for the outdoor features. Those would be for the amplified music, certainly on the 6th floor bar. If they decide to move forward with the pools, that would be a condition as well. And overall decibel limitations on outdoor music in line with the ones that were proposed for the other recent developments. Specific to this project would be conditions pertaining to perpetual maintenance for the promenade and the public features that run along the outside of the site, the on-site circulation improvements that were brought up before, operation of accessory features only following certificate of occupancy for the primary development, and limitation of slips for non-motorized water sports equipment and customer vessels only, so staff would not administratively approve anything related to motorized vessels in the future. So action's already been taken on the variance. That was one of the 3 requests that is not essential to the overall project. We do ask that you take action on both the first reading of ordinance 2024-08, as mentioned before. That is the density pool allocation that would allow for any density to this project whatsoever. We ask that you take action on the first reading of this request. Should this be approved, it would need to come back to you for second reading. And then the overall project approval, that's inclusive of the hotel itself, those other accessory conditional use requests, as well as the accessory uses that would be permitted under the hotel. Those would all fall under Resolution 2024-12. So we ask for action independently on both of those items. That's all I have as staff. If you would like to...
Brandon?
Yes.
Did you print out the future land use district descriptions for the bioresidential district and the policies?
Yes, we do, and we'll be introducing those as an amendment. Our staff will be passing those out, and this will be the purpose, intent, and the policies of the bioresidential district. Be happy to take any questions, or if you have questions for the applicant.
I have a question for
Yes.
you. Is it okay?
Sure.
Thank you.
Since the resolution mentions something particular that when I was reading throughout the whole application, the 12-slip Class A lodging dock. When I read on page 742 of our packet, the actual sovereignty submerged lands lease from the state of Florida, which expires November 13, 2026. That submerged land lease, last paragraph on page 742, use of property. The lease is hereby authorized to operate an 8-slip commercial docking facility with the fishing dock to be used exclusively for mooring of recreational vessels and passive recreational activities in conjunction with an upland commercial vacant lot without fueling. What does that mean? And do they have authority to get a 12-slip Class A lodging dock?
So you have to keep in mind that the state sovereign lands lease is separate and apart from the zoning and land use approvals that we do as a city. So they would have to go to DEP, Division of State Lands, and they're the staff or the Board of Trustees of the Internal Improvement Trust Fund, and they would have to amend it. They would have to amend it and get a new
Do they have it
lease.
already, the amendment?
The applicant can speak to that, I'm not sure, but we do handle this process separately, and that would still be a condition of them building or operating any kind of dock at that property.
And we're preempted from holding up our approval until they get the state approval. They're allowed to go and obtain them in the order they
It's so
want.
specific on property use.
Yeah, no, they would have to get that amended by the state.
So they can get an approval from us.
If you deny this, then they can continue to use this as a vacant property and use the dock under their existing lease. But if they're going to get a hotel and you approve it here, they would have to go get.
So that would have to be a condition of approval of getting.
It's separate. But we usually say you must obtain all federal and state permits, but you're not allowed to.
Gotcha.
The state legislature, again, preempted you a few years ago as a result of a rock mine that the city or one of the counties, Levy County, said, we're not going to approve your rock mine until you go get the Army Corps approval. And so the rock mine got lobbyists, and they went to the legislature, and the legislature said you can no longer say that you have to get the state and federal approvals first before you get your zoning approvals. So they have to all be considered independently now since that happened.
So that we really didn't need this attachment then, right, in this packet?
It's not really relevant to what you're doing.
Because that attachment A also shows an address of 3861 Gulf Boulevard, which only talks about 6 parcels because it's an 8-parcel property. So it's almost like it doesn't even match this, so it just stood out with me because I'm reading the packet.
I think it's just like kind of evidence that they would be able to get a state sovereign submerged land permit for a vessel. Here, they're just asking at the city level for paddle boards and non-motorized
quiet paddleboards or?
But they still have to get the land lease to put the docking structure up.
I mean, I know in that bayou,
Paddle
there's been a
boards,
lot of
pedal
issues
boards.
in getting,
Boats,
even
sorry.
for our living shoreline, Avenue 36. I mean, it was a lengthy process. That, I have a lot of environmental concerns with having commercial activity, whether it's the paddle boards and they're non-motorized. This is a breeding ground for manatees, okay? We have gazillion videos and pictures of this. It's a shallow area, you know, and I know from what I'm hearing from you is that we can't put this as part of a condition, but, you know, it's a big concern, I'll just say. So, anyways, just one point.
Commissioner Marriott?
Yeah, Brandon, could you go back to the slide or just refresh my memory on how many units they're asking for the pool and how many there are?
They're asking for just under a third. They're asking for 104 units, and there were 325 in the pool. There are now 261, and those were the units that were allocated. The difference is the units that were allocated to the Hotel Zamora. If this request were approved at the 104 unit density, it would be down to 157.
And what are the other areas where people can or would need to ask from units for the density pool? It's Town Center 2 and the Bayou Residential District. Those are the two.
As well as the activity center.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Thank you. This switched from resort facilities medium to Bayou Residential in 2012, correct?
Correct. Yes.
And so, okay. And so this project almost would have, or maybe would have worked under the resort facilities medium zoning.
It's very close.
Yeah.
It's very close to the 40 units per acre. So they would be over. They would be. I think the site's around 2.2 of an acre. So they would be allowed closer to 80 units were developed back then. So
Yeah.
And what was removed from the site was lower density than this, but.
Yeah. Yeah, I want to acknowledge that I'm sure for the property owner, that's incredibly frustrating to have purchased property in, and I think 2004 is what the tax assessor's records show, and to have purchased it at a time when you could do one thing and then have the zoning change to be something else. I'm certain that is an incredibly frustrating position to be in, particularly when for, you know, several years, 4 years leading up to that zoning change, the economics and the economy was such that developments really weren't happening. So I want to acknowledge that for the property owner, I'm sure this is just an incredibly frustrating situation. But I will say that from my standpoint, I'm not comfortable giving that many units from the density pool to one project at potentially the cost of anything else that could happen, you know, in the Town Center 2 district where I think there's a lot of potential for some good small projects to happen. So that's my opinion about the density or the units from the density pool.
Brandon, can you help us out with just what is the purpose of the Bayou Residential District? I think you mentioned it very early on. And I think you just gave everybody a handout, but I think for the record, we should have it just so that we all know what we're talking about.
Sure. Well, there's a few different purposes. The first is to act as, and what I believe I introduced at the beginning of the presentation, is to act as a transitional district between the higher intensity commercial to the west and the lower, obviously, intensity single-family uses over to the east.
And so you mean the west would be the west side of Gulf Boulevard?
Correct, yes.
So roughly what are we talking? What's across the street from this property on the west side of Gulf Boulevard?
We have the San Sierra condominiums.
Yes, we have condos.
Mm-hmm. We do have a few hotel projects in the vicinity.
Undertow.
Yes.
Okay, so we have condos, a few small motels. Any large hotels?
Not in the immediate vicinity that I'm aware of.
There's the beach house though, right?
There's beach house to the north, right?
So do any of these properties have golf course?
No.
Do they have rooftop bars?
No.
Okay. Do they have water slides?
No.
Do they have boat docks?
No, they won't.
Do they have a quiet pool? They have pools.
They have pools, right.
Almost all of them have pools, just looking at, okay, so they have pools. Do any of them have a CUP for live music, loud music, amplified music, anything else?
Not to my knowledge, no.
Okay. So if, and I'm just reading here straight out, it says, is a transitional area between higher intensity commercial uses along Gulf Boulevard and the lower density residential neighborhood on the east. Okay. So if the bar for high intensity is no golf, no bars, no slides, no boats, no rooftop bars, no music, no paddle boards. So that's the threshold for high intensity. It seems like we're not going from high to low. It seems like we're going from low commercial. It's really low commercial. The only thing I see is some of them have pools, and that's it. So the threshold is condos, small motels. I think Palmcrest may have a bar, but I don't remember exactly.
Undertow.
Undertow is a bar, yeah. Okay, so if that's the threshold for high, this seems like we're going exponentially way higher and not to a medium level down to a no level residential.
Sure, based on existing uses, I could see it, it's certainly an increase in intensity looking especially right across the street. However, there is capacity in those districts. The city did not set any kind of cap on the type of uses that were envisioned in this area, just other than specifying that there's a commercial component. But your point's taken.
Sure, and we're simply talking about, hey, here's the purpose of this district. The purpose of this district is to be lower intensity than what's across the street. What's across the street is a couple pools and 2 bars. So this would be lower to go to 0, but what they're asking for is actually not congruent with what the Land Development Code and Comprehensive Plan have in place here for this district, because they're asking for significantly something that is not envisioned by the zoning district. Just reading the plain text, we don't have to take any large leaps of reasoning here. It's just supposed to be a transition area between higher intensity commercial uses along Gulf Boulevard and the lower intensity residential. It's supposed to be kind of a buffer, transitional area going from here to here.
The comp plan also describes the character of the BR district in the subsection A.
Sure. And again, it talks primarily multifamily residential as a result of the lot depths, right? So it actually does take into consideration the size of the lots. Okay. Shall we hear from the applicant?
Yeah, Jack Boziak, architect. First, I'd like to say it's not out of reason as an architect or as a landowner to request something that's allowable under the code. And I'm sorry that it meets with hostility in some cases, but it's not out of consideration to make this kind of request. And I'm sorry that it offends you so dramatically. We are surrounded and transitional to, across the street, there are high rises, 9, 10, 8 stories high. So this could be considered transitional going towards the water in that it's only half the height of some of the surrounding buildings, including the adjacent property to the south. The city, my primary reason for coming before you was I felt that the review considerations, nothing outside of the request was not an allowable use. So we weren't coming in asking for something that wasn't in the code. So I feel that it shouldn't be something that would be outrageously, looked upon. We did have it was intended use as a hotel. We had some interest from Marriott originally. That was back, when we first started on this, and the intent always has been to be a hotel. The lot combination, I'm sorry that the city has accepted in several cases surveys and lots that are under one ownership. This never came up in the entire review process. So I would suggest that the city check into with the city attorney then, was this an improper acceptance of the application? Is a legal survey not, under one ownership, not acceptable? That is something that we should, when it's accepted, we should not be questioned as though we're trying to sneak something in. The lot combination is, nothing requested was outside of the regulations, with the exception of when we did have the extra 4 feet on the building. So we did not feel like we were coming in with an unreasonable request. Everything we requested was allowable under the code, and I'm sorry that it was such an offensive submittal, but it was within the codes and the allowable for the jurisdiction to review, consider, approve, deny. We didn't feel like we were coming in here to steal something. The planning board, my purpose for coming for you wasn't anything meant hostility-wise. We've merely felt that the considerations of record by the board and the recommendations and the review, not recommendations, but the review by staff supported what we were requesting well within the code. I'm sorry that it was so upsetting, but I think the planning board basis for denial is very weak. I think that the request before you and before them was not totally unreasonable and done with any ill-gotten will. So I don't think that it was not reasonable for me to question the very weak, and they're in your record, by the way, very weak reasons for denial, and we felt that it was not reviewed properly, and we felt that it was not an unreasonable request, and that we even altered the pool to bring it further to within the regulations that are in existence. So we did not feel like this was some crazy review that we should have never considered. We thoroughly reviewed and understood the code. So I'm sorry that it's caused so much stir in some cases, but I really think that the planning board denial had a very weak basis, and I was here to request that you consider the basis that we were denied on, not, you know, the other criteria that I've heard tonight. But I do appreciate your taking it into consideration.
Mr. Boziak, this is not an appeals process, right? The planning board and city attorney, please by all means correct me at any point. We're not here to adjudicate whether the planning board was correct or wrong, because they don't actually make any decisions other than making a recommendation. So they don't approve a project. They simply say, we think it has merit, or we don't think it has merit. They simply make a recommendation to the commission. And the reason that we are here today is so that we can hear you. And, you know, I haven't heard anyone here reference any of the criteria that you mentioned that you objected to, that the planning board did not recommend this project. In fact, what I've heard so far is from the commissions that have spoken up, they have cited chapter verse of the Land Development Code, the comprehensive plan, and they've given, you know, thoughts and opinions and interpretations of those codes as to why it may or may not fit. And so, you know, my question to you then is, you know, I would appreciate a rebuttal, right? If we say, look, we doesn't, so I'll lay out the things that I said, right? And then you can, you know, give me a counter. So when I say, you know, this is designed to be a transitional area between high-intensity commercial, not height, but a commercial use. We're not talking about height here. And the intensity across the street is 6 or 7 pools and 2 bars. That is, on your property alone, is more than that all the other 8, 9 projects combined. And so I don't see how yours is a lower threshold. In fact, you are asking for a lot of things that do not exist in the high-intensity area, right? You're asking for a hardship when there's no documented hardship. I mean, wanting to have a higher ROI on your property is not considered a hardship. I mean, I'd love higher ROIs on my properties. So I am not offended by you being here and asking what you're asking, nor am I offended by the owner. I think it is well within your right to do that and ask for those things. But I do want to also comment on one of the things you said is, it says you're not asking for anything that's not allowed. Well, you technically can ask for anything you want. There is no restriction on what you can ask for. The difference that we're talking about is what is by right and what can the commission grant, and the definition is in the words, the conditional use application, right? It's an application because it's not by right. In fact, the very first lines of the comprehensive plan say so that, this is not by use, but it is by right at the discretion of the commission. And so, yes, you can ask for anything you want, and I'm certainly not, in fact, people have asked for more than you have, and I wasn't offended then either, because, again, I'm not, it's not that just because I may not agree doesn't mean I don't understand. I understand why you would ask for this. I understand why you would want these amenities. And if I was building a resort and a hotel, I would want those things as well, most likely. But the issue is you were asking for a resort and a hotel with the multiple pools, with water slides, with boat slips, and commercial activity, right? So having a rental place for paddle boards and kayaks, having, actual commercial activities, bars on site in a designated residential area, right? Here's where some of that disconnect is. Can you ask for it? Sure, you can ask for anything you want. But it doesn't mean that just because the commission doesn't agree with you that we're in some way offended by you or by your ask. Not at all. I think it's well within your right to ask for those things. It's just, I think what we're looking for is, give us your arguments why you think this project conforms, why it meets the criteria. We've given you reasons why we may think it does not meet the criteria. Give us a breakdown of, okay, here's why I think this conforms to land development code and the comprehensive plan and the zoning for this district.
Okay. Well, first of all, it meets all the criteria, and with the alterations we propose, it's within the criteria that are outlined in this segment of the code and in the conditional use that allows the hotel density, the density to be, that we're requesting to be requested for this site. So we're not requesting anything on this application that is not allowed by the code. So I think that's number one, the first thing for consideration. And I think that under all the considerations that the planning board can take, I think that the most egregious things are when you repeat or read the things that are in the city transcript as well. Everything we basically have requested was not outrageously outside the guidelines of the code as something we are allowed to request. But I think the considerations that I outlined and that are up on your screen, were up on your screen.
Sure, but the planning board isn't the one making the decision. This commission is making the decision, and so far I haven't heard from anybody on this commission even mention any of the objections from the planning board. So for all intents and purposes, those objections were stated then. No one is repeating them, so no one's making a decision based on those objections as far as I can hear.
Well, I respect that, but I am allowed also to, when I see something that's like that we were turned down because I drove a Volkswagen or something, there are egregious reasons that we can be turned down that I think are incorrect professional considerations by the board, the planning board. And if you consider that that freebie use is a reason that the planning board can turn us down among the crazy ones that are outlined, then we differ.
Sure. So, but I was here today. I haven't heard anyone mention the freebie up here.
Pardon me?
I haven't heard anyone mention the freebie up here.
No, I mentioned it because I came before you not to take your time and my time and go through all this and attempt. I feel like that the considerations at the planning board level were incorrect, improper, and not responsible to the code.
Sure, and so
And I think I had a reasonable request in, and I had a right to come before the commission to voice this. And I'm not here to get into a hostile argument or but I do feel that the board should be aware that we were, in my opinion, unreasonably turned down for reasons that have no connection to the code.
So again, you're here, we're hearing you, and none of us have brought those things up, and so whether we may or may not agree with those reasons, it's, you've had your chance at a second hearing, right?
And that's all I asked for.
So-
I mean, I really am sorry that there's an interpretation of the lots that's not correct. Unfortunately, that should have probably come up at the submittal level.
I don't think there was an interpretation. I think the commissioner simply asked, whether something is permitted, just like I asked, what is the reason, what is the purpose of this district? We're just simply asking the staff for clarification, which is why we have experts here like our staff, so they can provide that clarification. And, it was a simple question. Can they combine? It turns out, yes, you can combine. In fact, it says, in the purpose, it says we encourage it. Right? So, again, it's no one was challenging. It was just a simple question, right? It's just because we ask a question doesn't mean I ask a lot of questions. Doesn't mean I.
And I respect the questions that are being asked. I think that I, on the same page, have the right to question what I would, in my opinion, professional opinion, is, and going all the way back to, I did the original approval on Corey Avenue 20 years ago, and that was a tough one that had tremendous issues with the citizens, and it met a very reasonable solution back at that time. It's not the one that's out there now, but it's the original one that was approved in, I think, 06 or 05, something like that. So I'm not here trying to argue my case. I'm here to simply say that that we deserved reconsideration, either if not back at that level, at this level, because I think that the reasons for denial are not related to the review process. I think they are reasons for denial that are not relevant to the project as we submitted and was reviewed. And that's the consideration I'm here on tonight, to appeal that. If I'm not here to argue anything, or I think that's a reasonable request. If an appeal process is not allowable, then I stand corrected.
Do you feel like you've not received a fair hearing today?
Pardon me? I feel like I'm being questioned as to why I'm here, to be quite honest. And I'm here on the appeal process of feeling that the reasons I put into the record are not justifiable reasons for us to have been denied. And I think
it makes you feel better. We ask every applicant why they're here.
Yeah, no, and I
So
recited that.
for us to understand, okay, what is your purpose? What are you looking to accomplish? What do you want to do with this project? Where do you see it going? How does this enhance the community? How does it benefit the community? What value does it add to the surrounding neighborhood? Right? So, these are questions we ask every applicant. In fact, I've been quite gentle with you.
And we are allowed to disagree
by comparison.
on all sides, and my side and your side. And I respect the fact that you are, you're entitled to your approval, denial, opinion, but I feel like my right to be here is equal.
Sure, of course.
And I appreciate your consideration, and it's unfortunate that we don't see the same way, but we'll have to look at it and see what our alternatives are on the site.
Well, we haven't made a decision yet, and I think some of the other commissioners have questions for you as well. So, Commissioner Reznicki, I think you were first.
Yeah, I do have some questions on your application, just for clarification. Because on page 643, which is your first question, which is asking special conditions and circumstances that exist, could you clarify, from what I heard, is you're saying because of how they're being combined is giving you a property that's not buildable?
The
the setbacks
I
because
feel
of
that-
what you want to propose, right? Because what you all want to build.
Yes. I feel that the setbacks, although they're the shape of the site, to me, the planning board should be considering things other than, and I'll read them just again, just to be sure. A traffic study that was not required, the overall density, which is an allowable density, the freebie use, whatever that is. I mean, these are actual responses from the reason for denial.
My question
So
is not about the planning board. What I'm asking you as the applicant, what do you feel is unusual? What's unusual that the desire to build what you want to build is not matching the lot configuration?
No, I think the lot configuration is very difficult, and I think to build anything on that configuration.
Was there something built there before?
There were, well, yes, there also were houses across the street on the beach at one time, so that's not a criteria for.
No, but my question is, was there something there before?
Yeah, there was something there before.
On page 650, number 7, you mentioned multiple pools for Bayou District, almost like that's not a big deal, and you were comparing it to the Don Cesar Hotel on the application, but the Don is in a medium resort district. So is there something that you can compare these multiple pools to that's within the same Bayou residential district?
Well, if you're going to bring the Don Cesar up.
You can't. It's not the
or-
same
or-
district.
or
I want to
even
know
the,
what's in that
No,
same
I understand,
district.
but if you're allowed to compare them, I suppose I'm not allowed to. But I would say that it is not an unreasonable request, given the size of the site at 2.67 or 8 acres. It's one of the last substantial sites left within the city, and with the investment that the owner has in the property, we have to pursue uses that are allowable.
My question, since you said the investor, who is the investor?
The owner of the property.
So the owner of the property is the one that's going to build this project?
The owner of the property, along with us, are the people that were going to build on this property, yes.
On the application, one of the questions is asking about the finances, and it doesn't show.
I've repeated that I had a
And since you
commitment.
mentioned the planning board, which I did watch, my understanding was your response at the planning board was that the current owner was not building this project.
The current, that was a misunderstanding then. If that was in the record, it couldn't. The owner and I have worked together on this property and have been working on this property for probably 10 or 12 years, maybe 15 years. So I have been working with the owner over this entire period of time. We've had different varied people of interest coming into the thing with us. And at times, due to the economy, for example, people have reversed their course or requested something that was outside the parameters of the code that we didn't want to go for variances that were excessive.
Okay. If the property were to sell during the scope of this development, then it would go with the applicant. I mean, we're making this property, from what I'm seeing, is more valuable, if you want to call it valuable, because you're selling it with all these features, right? Again,
No,
I
we were
would
not.
have to go back and look and see, because I clearly remember you stating that the current owner was not building this property. And also, one of the pages, page 663, number 29, asks about current violations and complaints. Are there any current complaints on this lot?
I understand there was a complaint made. However, when the attorneys for the owner contacted the city and said that all permits, which there was what happened was the permit supposedly for the parking had expired during the hurricane recently. And the attorneys contacted, I believe, the city attorney or somebody, I'm not sure who, and I apologize, I'm not sure who it was, and brought up the fact that all permits have been extended by the state or by the regulatory authorities because of the hurricane. And that was what last I've heard of it. I have not heard anything else, and perhaps the city attorney can advise you on that.
Brandon can come up and address it. My understanding is that they had an approval to park cars for a certain purpose, and then because of the governor's executive order during the hurricanes, that not only the permit beginning, but the permit expiration dates are also extended. So they filed their required letter requesting the extension of the expiration.
That's correct. It was set to expire back in October. It was extended for now until the state of emergency ends. We are aware that there are maintenance issues with the lot. We've contacted the entity who is parking on the lot, and we've made them aware of that. We'll be following up with them regardless of the outcome of this case. That is part of the conditional use permit. The conditions do still apply, so there is a requirement, regardless of what occurs tonight, that the lot needs to be maintained, and we're aware of that.
So this current conditional permit that's on this lot, is it being used to what the conditions were set by the commission of that time?
It's being used for the use that was approved by the commission at the time. There are maintenance issues that we are asking to be corrected, so one of the conditions relates to maintenance of the site. We have asked them to correct that, and if it becomes a recurring issue, the conditional use permit would be in jeopardy, just like any other that isn't following what was approved. So,
and I know it's, and I was here when that condition, but my point is, because when I saw there was a table on this application that shows that there was 3 years, only one violation per year, I guess that's documented violation, right? So, and the reason why I say this is because you're here to come for a conditional application. Yet the current lot has an application, a conditional permit that has had violations. So I just wanted to mention that. And again, this is trying to figure out who's building this property. Are we going to have the same ownership that's had current violations on a permit? Conditional permit. On page 658, thank you, Brendan, the public benefit requirements, what are the public benefit requirements other than I think the prominent, I don't know if it was called a prominent, but the sidewalk that goes around is to allow public to walk around this property? Is that the public benefit?
Public access to the property, the improvement of a property that's sat in disrepair for years and then was demolished, and a proposed use within the code, tax base, properties that are destroyed up and down the beach. It's irrelevant. Is a relevant, not irrelevant. It's a relevant use to the code, and I don't think it's an unreasonable reason for us to request it. And once again, I'll repeat, the reason I'm here tonight is the basis for denial in the planning board level, and I thought that I was coming for a reasonable appeal of that decision on the basis it was decided is not in accordance with regulations, in my opinion.
Yeah, this is not an appeal. They just make a recommendation. They're only an advisory board, so the final decision is made here. So there's been no decision. The planning board just makes a recommendation.
When they state the basis of their decision,
they didn't make a decision, they just make a recommendation. So this is a de novo hearing here, so it's not an appeal. These guys looking at this fresh, or the city council looks at it fresh. It doesn't matter what.
So it doesn't matter what basis they used for their decision and stated?
No, it matters what happens here in this hearing right now. This is the quasi-judicial hearing on the city council, the final hearing.
Well, I don't think it would have gotten to this.
Or the first reading of the ordinance.
Yeah.
For conditional use, and then the decision on whether they want to, under 4.12D, allocate the lodging units from the density pool based on the criteria in 4.12D, which is a public benefit. So they'll weigh the public benefit here, and that's within their discretion to do that.
Well, I would repeat that my appeal was on the basis that was used to render this opinion that's stated in writing in this, and I believe the basis was wrong. If they, for example, had said it's zoned wrong, and they were incorrect.
I'm not sure that why you're not understanding, but this is not an appeal. You make your case fresh to this city council. So you'll need to make your case fresh to the city council, what is the public benefit? I think I've heard you do that, but it's not an appeal of any mistakes you think the planning board made.
Well, I think when you're asked whether you want to withdraw your plan because of the denial by the planning board or the recommendation from the planning board, you have to make a decision. Am I going to appeal it or you know?
I haven't heard anyone recommend that you withdraw it here on city council, so you certainly can come forward from.
No, the staff request was, do you want to go ahead? Do you want to withdraw your petition since it's been denied, recommended denial by the planning board? And our response was, no, we feel that the reason, whether it's the reason for the basis.
That's your right, yeah, it's your entitlement and your right to go forward.
Yeah, and that's why I'm here. And I apologize that I've, taken my right, I guess.
So, do I keep asking questions? I mean, I'm trying to get clarification on your application, sir, so I'm not, we're not appealing, this is not an appeal, and I heard you say it was a recommendation from the planning board. It wasn't a final decision. So now we are looking at your application, and I'm going through your application with some questions, so you could help clarify.
Sure, and I'm.
So on page 683, the goal 1 was, and this is on your application, and I know I'm citing pages, but I don't know.
Yeah, I don't have them available, so
the goal is to conserve, protect, appropriately manage, and where appropriate, restore or enhance the city's natural resources, aquatic, wetland, air, terrestrial, to ensure the highest environmental quality possible. When I looked at your plans, and of course, the wanting of the use for watercraft, whether unmotorized or not, and Brendan, you might have to correct me on this, from what my understanding on the code is that we cannot add more drainage, right, for stormwater from this property. So you're using what's there already, no additional areas to drain out, right? You have to use what's available, but how are you improving drainage? Are you filtering it? Are we catching the stormwater on site? And the second part to that has to do with the environment on the seawall. I know that seawall, I mean, like you said, they've owned this since the 20s, I believe, or I think someone on the commission, or the mayor, you might have.
2004.
Okay, 2004. Pretty sure that seawall hasn't been rebuilt. So our new ordinance is a 5 nav, and I don't know if that's part of this plan. Does it indicate a 5 nav on these plans? And if so, and if not, then how is it going to be built? Because I know other condominiums, there's a condominium in the Downstar district that's having issues trying to get to the 5 nav because the building is so close to the seawall. How are you proposing to do the 5 nav and protect the bayou on discharge?
Well, the discharge plan, there was a civil plan submitted that would control the stormwater and the drainage and the retention and treatment of the water flow. So right now, there is no control. And as to the seawall was proposed to be totally reconstructed within the construction limitations of the project. So I think that on those 2 items, I mean, I think that we did submit that we are, the plan that we are, controlling the drainage, setting up all according to the code and the state regulations, the control of the drainage to eliminate any runoff that presently may be running into the bayou or it is not controlled that well.
Okay. So the plans do indicate the 5
Yeah,
okay.
well, I believe they, yes.
Okay. There was an error too on page 692 that said that the closest, and I think this might have been a staff comment at this point, the closest public beach access is serviced by the Sunrunner, but the closest beach access is the one just north, or sorry, on the south end of the property of Miramar, and the Sunrunner doesn't serve that location. And I don't know if it's been addressed, but the staff had concerns about on-site circulation. I know Brendan presented and talked about the curb cuts and just having the 2, but that there's still concern about the circulation of traffic within the site as well. So again, trying to improve safety on Gulf Boulevard, not only circling within, so people walking within the property, but then coming and going. So I did have concern with that as well.
Well, I would question that there was anything that was not designed and properly address those situations on the property. I think staff review didn't bring any of that up as to specifics, and I think what was brought up, there were some items that we did correct during the process, because recognize this process has gone on for some time now.
Yeah.
So we have always...
It's on page 694.
We always have addressed any comments brought up by staff like that, and I'm sure that we addressed it.
Okay, I didn't see it, so I'm asking for you to tell me, because
Well,
I only see the comments. So like for the page 738 about acknowledge for noise, how are we going to deal concerns of noise? The response is simply acknowledge.
Well, there was more of a specific response. We had submitted responses about the control of music, the control of, of those things, the hours on the what we call the quiet pool, to ensure that there wasn't there wasn't noise traveling across the water at night. I mean, we did respond every time a question like this came up. And I would have to go back and bring those submittals or resubmittals or those items that we did address. We did always address any question that came up.
City Clerk, do we have any audience comments?
John Kersman.
Please state your name and address for the record.
John Kersman, Behe Honda Way. I am a beach steward, but I'm speaking purely for myself. My first question would be about beach access. There was mention of the Zamora. I know the Zamora has been involved in discussions about beach access. And so I just, residents, go to the beach, but I think tourists would probably be more consistent in the number of days they would go to the beach. So I would, just question that, where that beach access would be and how much. I also believe that there's been attempts earlier to have paddleboarding go on in that area, and it was denied. So I don't know why that would change now. This is not probably a constructive comment, although, maybe there's a creative thing. Back in 2014 and 15, the city worked and came up with a plan for Corey Avenue. And they developed that plan, and it was to have commercial projects. And, I hear what they're talking about for this Windward Pass, and I go, what a terrific sounding project. But it's in a residential area, or it sounds like it is. And Corey Avenue, it sounds like perfect for like the Corey Landings spot. And then I hear what they're now talking about at Corey Landings, which sounds really residential. And I think, oh, that would just be perfect for Windward, for the Bayou area, because that's where people just go and live. And it's just a shame that for whatever reason, we have a comprehensive plan, and I just don't know how these things happen. It's just what happens. But there's Corey Landings it's set up for a big dock with lots of people to go, and it's right by all the shops and all this great stuff for tourism. And all of a sudden now we're getting the perfect thing for Corey Landings over on this project, and we're getting residential at Corey Landing, and I just don't get it. And I know we can't do anything about it, but I wish there was a way to trade.
Thank you, Mr. Kersman. I think just for clarification, and maybe Commissioner Reznicki can correct me, when you say discussion with Zamora, you mean a lawsuit, correct?
Oh, I don't know about that.
Yeah, if you're asking me, there's a current litigation going on with the Zamora, so
About the beach
don't
access.
have any data.
I didn't mean to step into that.
No, I'm just simply saying that the discussions are actually a lawsuit
Oh,
Exactly.
that's
about
more than
beach
I knew.
access.
And then-
Frank Quillen.
Good evening. If you'll please state your name and address for the record.
Dr. Frank Quillen, 4160 Bella Vista Drive, St. Pete Beach. I've been there since 1956 at that location, right across from this way. Little McPherson Bay is called Little because it's little. It's not 100 yards. It might be 50 yards in the middle and larger down on the entranceway, but that's all silted in now, so you can't get in and out real easy. But we have manatees and manatee babies being born. There is a fresh water well at the end of the cul-de-sac, and they're in there all the time. I've got videos on my phone that will show you this. But we don't need paddle boards and jet boats rented out going up and down. This is a residential area. Several years ago, there was a paddleboard company on Gulf Boulevard that came and wanted to put paddleboards and train people, and we got that stopped because of the privacy that would be invaded by people going up and down the bay. Now we're coming along and wanting to put 12 piers with boats being rented by people, paddleboards and everything else on a private small inlet. 2 boats can hardly get past each other in those areas. So I don't see any need for any boating activities at all from this project. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, sir.
That's all.
That's all? Okay. Commissioners, questions, comments?
I will say that I appreciate you coming. It's an ask. CUP is an ask. Variance is an ask. I raised my son and any of the other children in my life. I said, you have to ask. If you don't ask, it's a no. So I commend you on asking. Again, the planning board is an advisory board. The decision is actually made here. Based on the zoning there with the Bayou Residential, for me, I feel that the density intensity of 104 units as condo hotels with various amenities, that the noise issues that we currently have are a bit overwhelming, and to see more of that, I have a lot of concerns for. I have concerns on the environmental side of it as well. So I do have quite a few concerns on it. The public safety aspect, we've had people run across, children cross Gulf Boulevard, and with your beach access being over near the Miramar, which would be the closest one, it's a ways up the road. And we could put a crosswalk over there, they're not gonna go there. We're going to go exactly right across the street. It's like playing Frogger across Gulf Boulevard. I'm concerned, again, traffic is another one with 104 units there. And I just have a lot of concerns on this. I just don't really see the benefit to the community, especially the residential community. And I agree that then density and intensity doesn't seem transitional right there. It seems like it's more intense coming from the San Sierra. San Sierra's not going anywhere. They don't have a rooftop bar as well. So I just don't see all that activity there being of benefit to the residential neighborhood, let alone the people on the other sides, or the side that's going to have the splash pool and the quiet pool. I just feel that is a very, very difficult item to say yes to.
So looking at this project, I just refer back to Land Development Code, Section 4.1, which states, to review conditional use applications. The purpose: certain uses are conditional rather than uses by right. they're subject to the conditional use regulations because they may, but not necessarily, have significant adverse effects on the environment. Between the manatees, the rest of the waterways in that area being so shallow, having a commercial activity on that waterway, well, that certainly will have an adverse effect on that environment. Could have significant adverse effect on public services. Right. You know, does it conform to the character of the area? It is a commercial transient lodging facility in a residentially designated district. So does it conform to the character? I don't see how it does. It could create a nuisance. Whatever we're going to call it, quiet pool or not, I've been to enough pools at enough resorts, enough hotels to know that it's not going to be quiet. I mean, we can call it what we want, but that's really not, that's not really an option, right? Having a rental facility for paddle boards or for any kind of watercraft, you know, a couple 100 feet, maybe 200 feet, 300 feet from somebody's backside of their house, well, that can be a nuisance. That's going to be a nuisance, especially on a, you know, spring break weekend, any kind of weekend, you know, in season. Having a rooftop bar, having loud music. We just have to look at the neighbor, and they've been a nuisance to the people across the street. So a review of these uses is necessary due to the impact that it may have on the surrounding area and neighborhood, and specifically the Land Development Code and Comprehensive Plan are talking about the residents, the residential areas adjacent or close to. And you first came today, and one of the very first things you said is, I can't believe we have to listen to what the people in the single-family homes have to say. When in fact, the comprehensive plan has in mind the protection of the rights and the quiet enjoyment of those residents. It specifically states that 3 or 4 different times throughout the comprehensive plan that one of the things that it wants to do is foster, you know, harmony between the commercial, the higher intensity, and the residential. And it takes that into consideration specifically, right? So, you know, why are we looking at this? Because, you know, it is right next to residential, right? And the plan has that in place. So because it may impact the surrounding area neighborhood, the conditional use review provides an opportunity, right? It's just this, it's an opportunity to allow the use when there are minimal impacts, right? Or to allow these uses when mitigation measures have addressed the concerns. So we've heard about all the different negative impacts it could have. The one thing that we haven't heard is, you know, how, you know, what mitigating things we're going to use to offset the negatives, right? We've read the list of things that, all the negative impacts. What we haven't heard from anyone is give any kind of explanation, okay, yes, we may have, you know, 30 people in the water creating havoc and, you know, endangering the manatees and the environment. But what no one's talked about, okay, how are we going to abate that? Right? So in those circumstances, you know, if the commission can't see how this doesn't have a negative impact, or if there is a negative impact on the environment, the neighbors, the surrounding area, and it's abated, in that case, it is up to the commission to deny the use if the concerns cannot be resolved. And so, for my part, looking at the comprehensive plan, looking at the Land Development Code, I don't see how your project has addressed those issues, how it has provided any kind of, you know, you're asking for significantly increased density, You've asked to push it out farther to the margins than anywhere else. You've asked for significantly greater commercial use than any property on the island, really, that we have right now. There's not a property on the island right now that has all of the things that you're asking for. And the challenge I'm having is you haven't provided any argument, any solution, or any ideas on how to address the concerns that are rightfully brought so by both the commission and the residents that would have to live next door, which the comprehensive plan and land development code specifically had in mind to protect. And in fact, it uses the word protect about 2 or 3 dozen times, specifically. So I think that gives you an idea which way I'm going to be voting. But the reason is because it does not meet the standards of the land development code and the comprehensive plan, as outlined, as we've been instructed to review. And if the criteria doesn't fit, if it doesn't match, I don't see how I could vote for it. So we are on action, Commissioner.
I ask your indulgence for just a minute because this is barely relevant, but I've been biting my tongue so hard it's about to start to bleed.
Sure.
And the gentleman who spoke on public comment about the paddleboard company that wanted to ruin McPherson Bayou, that's my company. And I was the one who wanted to rent paddleboards behind my business on McPherson Bayou. And I oftentimes have had people ask me why I'm appear to be so friendly towards businesses who come before the commission for conditional uses. And it's because I was the one standing out there asking for a conditional use for something that was very reasonable, and not only was very reasonable, was something that I had already been doing for years with 0 complaints and no problems before it was brought to my attention that I needed a conditional use to do that. And then had a room full of people fabricating stories about what the effect was going to be. And so it's a little bit difficult for me to sit here and listen to people say that, you know, a half a dozen people paddleboarding on McPherson Bayou is going to kill all the manatees and ruin everyone's property values and destroy their peace and quiet because it's patently false. And so, again, thank you for indulging me. I know that it's only barely relevant to what we're discussing. But I couldn't bring myself to sit here without saying that. And so with that being said, unless somebody else has something very significant to say, I would like to make a motion to deny ordinance 2024-08.
I second.
City Clerk, if you please do a roll call.
Commissioner Mulholland,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Marriott,
Yes.
Commissioner Robinson,
Yes.
Commissioner Ruznicki,
Yes.
Mayor Petrilla.
Yes. Next, we move on to action item 6B, consideration of resolution 2024-12, conditional use permit 23085, to allow for the development of Windward Pass. Did I read that
I
again?
think you can try that again.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Hold on, let's make sure we understand where we're at right now, because
We did the
what
conditional
was
use permit first.
2024-08?
What was the ordinance?
That was the ordinance
variance.
for units
What
of
agenda
temporary
item
lodging density.
number was that?
7A.
I believe what we just passed was 20.
Okay, so that was 7A. So now we need to go back to do
12?
resolution number 2024-12, which is 6.
Did we do 12 or 8?
Sorry.
Yeah, sorry, I did it out of order.
No, that's okay, you could do them in
Did
any order you wish.
Yeah.
So
and
let's
it's
go back now and we'll do resolution 2024-12, entertain a motion on that.
I'm sorry, the motion that Commissioner Marriott made was to deny the conditional use application,
So
which,
that was the reading of ordinance 2024-08 for allocation of the density units.
That's the density pool units, under 4.12 subsection D.
would you mind indulging me just for fun, because I remember her saying to deny the application? Let's just do both of them again.
Let's do both of them again to be clean.
Yep.
Let's just make sure that I don't want to come back and have to read the transcript and say that we voted on the same thing twice, so we skipped one.
Okay. Do you want to go in the order that they are on the agenda and take 6B?
Let's do that.
Sure.
That would be Resolution 2024-12, the conditional use permit application 23085.
All right, so I will make a motion to deny Resolution 2024-12, conditional use permit number 23085.
And I second.
City Clerk?
Commissioner Mulholland,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Marriott,
Yes.
Commissioner Robinson,
Yes.
Commissioner Ruznicki,
Yes.
Mayor Petrilla.
Yes. Okay, next we have ordinances. 7A, first reading of ordinance 2024-08. City Clerk, I believe, sorry.
This is
the
to
attorney,
allocate.
you've already read this?
This is to allocate the 104 units of temporary lodging density from the density pool. Just
And
to
you've
be clear,
already
so we
read-
need a motion on that one.
I'm saying you already read this item, correct?
Read that.
You read
Yes.
that one?
Yes.
Okay, I thought you read the resolution.
I read all three.
You
at the
read all
very
of them.
beginning.
Okay, is there a motion?
A motion to deny, make sure I got the right number, to deny the first reading of ordinance 2024-08.
Deny at first reading. That way there won't be a
Deny at
second reading.
I motion to deny at first reading ordinance 2024-08.
Second.
City Clerk, if you'll please do a roll call.
Vice Mayor Marriott,
Yes.
Commissioner Robinson,
Yes.
Commissioner Ruznicki,
Yes.
Commissioner Mulholland,
Yes.
and Mayor Petrilla.
Yes. Okay. Next, we have item 7A, 7B, first reading of ordinance 2025-12, amendment to Land Development Code.
An ordinance of the City of St. Pete Beach, Florida, correcting errors in prior ordinances by amending the city's Land Development Code, Division 16, CG2 Commercial District, Section 16.2, permitted principal uses and structures to recognize and allow full-service restaurants, and Division 33, CC2 Commercial Corridor, Gulf Boulevard District, Section 33.7, density and intensity, to clarify that single-family residences are prohibited, and providing for codification, conflict, severability, correction of scrivener's errors, construction, publication, and an effective date. And this is a kind of a cleanup ordinance, and Brandon will explain it.
Yeah, just briefly on this one, as the city starts to get redevelopment applications in, and as property owners are looking to move forward, we have found two errors in our code that we're looking to clean up. The first pertains to Section 16.2, the CG2, which is a commercial zoning district. It's the only zoning of a few properties in the city. Back in 2015, the city had intended to allow full-service restaurants in the zoning district. It made it into the title of the ordinance. It didn't make it into the body of the ordinance. So what was amended in our code did not actually amend this district to allow for full service. It does allow for limited service. It does allow for takeout, bars, clubs, and things like that. So it is consistent with what's allowed in the zoning district already. We're just hoping to fix that, actually make it into the body of the code. The change to Section 33.7 is to complement a change that was correctly made back in 2017. This is in the CC2 zoning district, which is a zoning of approximately south of 70th along Gulf Boulevard to about 63rd on the west side and a little bit further south on the east side. The code was changed back in 2017 to state that single-family development, standalone single-family development in this district is prohibited. That is consistent with the comprehensive plan. However, there is some language that a few owners have found to be confusing in 33.7 that does imply that a single-family unit is allowed to properties in this zoning. It's not allowed based on the use code, but if you were to read that, and I understand where they're coming from, there's concerns that they're insinuating that they are permitted a single-family residence at that property. So we're just cleaning that up. We're making it consistent with the Land Development Code uses and the comprehensive plan. Happy to take any questions.
So where exactly is CG2?
CG2 is the property on the west side of 73rd and Corey and 75th, and it's the property that Woody's currently sits on, which is a full-service restaurant, so it would allow for their redevelopment. It's also the parking lot to the north that I believe is currently used for the Toasted Monkey or Buoys. So.
And if this cleanup were not to happen, what would happen to those properties?
They could still redevelop. They would be allowed a eating and drinking establishment, but they would be limited to the few that made it properly into the code. Limited service, which would be a delicatessen with limited seats, a bakery or a coffee shop, something in that realm. They would be allowed a standalone bar or a code calls it a saloon, which is classified slightly differently, but they would not be allowed a table service sit-down restaurant at that location.
Questions, comments? Y'all know the drill.
Yeah. So do we need public comment on this? I don't think there is any, but no. Okay.
The second one was the...
I'll make a motion to approve the first reading of ordinance. Wait a minute. First reading of ordinance 2025-12.
I second.
City Clerk, if you'll please do a roll call.
Commissioner Robinson?
Yes.
Commissioner Resnicki?
Yes.
Commissioner Mulholland?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Marriott?
Yes.
Mayor Petrilla?
Yes.
Thank you.
Next, we have item 7C, first reading of ordinance 2025-13.
An ordinance of the City of St. Pete Beach, Florida, providing for an amendment to the budget for fiscal year 2025 by increasing appropriations for expenditure in the general fund, wastewater, reclaimed water fund, stormwater fund, and construction project fund, providing for codification, conflict severability, correction of scrivener's error, construction, publication, and an effective date.
Good evening, Mayor and Commission. Devin Schmidt. Are you able to see my screen and hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. So this is the FY 2025 budget amendment overview. I have a quick presentation that I'll take you through related to the ordinance before you this evening. So I'm not going to spend too much time on these slides, as this was discussed earlier at our budget workshop, but we do have some short-term considerations as we're looking at this budget amendment that relates to our revenues and FEMA reimbursements, pending an emergency bridge loan, parking revenue stabilization, unknown tariff impacts, and property taxes for uninhibited properties. We are considering some strategic long-term considerations, and again, I know we spoke about this earlier this evening, so I'm going to skip over this slide. As we're looking at the budget comparisons, this is a comprehensive overview of the budget comparisons by fund, by fiscal impact, showcasing the various budget categories and funds for the general fund, building, capital, and a detailed table outlines the funding sources, uses, and highlights the estimated beginning fund balances as of September 30th are unaudited. So I just wanted to provide that high-level overview. The areas where we have a change in fund balance, we do anticipate FEMA reimbursements, Pump Station 1 grant reimbursement, and the potential of the emergency bridge loan to backfill some of those areas. Similarly, this slide provides a comparison by fund, but in an actual basis, so the Commission can understand what we have received to date. Again, we would intend to utilize those same levers that were included in the previous slide. So the ask within the general fund is across various departments, notably in the Community Development Department. We see an increase to support the potential of a new planning manager, while information technology has multiple line items reflecting both planned and unplanned expenditures including IT support, new hires, the emergency medicals, and then moving on into our EMS, we're looking at shifting the captain positions. This will be fully reimbursed by Pinellas County. This table also highlights the FEMA funding for the hurricane recovery efforts. At a prior commission meeting, the commission did see all of the contracts that were brought forward after the close of the emergency. So what this is doing is providing a budget for those contracts. Additionally, in parks and facilities, we have allocated funds for essential services and equipment, just ensuring our operational efficiency. And overall, these adjustments just reflect our commitment to addressing the department needs while maintaining our fiscal responsibility. In our wastewater fund, we are asking for some budget transfers, which includes allocations for our SCADA monitoring and our FOG software. And then looking to add to some of the balances and add based on fiscal prior year spending. So some of that is just based on historically what we have spent in some of those funds and departments. In stormwater, we're requesting an amended budget for the NPDES permit consultant, as well as an increase to the budget for Halfin Associates for the 45th Ave drainage improvements design. In our building fund, we are requesting for an amendment to increase related to our current workload and account for our larger projects coming online prior to fiscal year 26. The request also includes a portion of the planning manager and the 6 permit technicians that were brought to commission earlier this year. The $300,000 for the increase for the building official and the contract building official, that's just increasing that so that we're able to have that contract. In our capital improvement fund, we have a request to add to cover our active POs so that we are shoring up the budget with the active purchase orders for the City Hall HVAC design. We are putting some funding back in as we do not need a transfer that was listed there. We have several capital IT improvement projects that were inadvertently not included in the 2025 budget in the fall. We are asking for budget increase for the Martina seawall repair engineering design and seawall outflow modifications, as well as a change order to address the building permit comments. And then with Ferris Pools at the Community Rec Center, the resurfacing project, and again, that was previously approved by the commission. Just wanted to highlight that we do have some upcoming budget workshops, and I know we talked about this earlier, so I'll just pause on that. And with all the information presented for you, this is a summary taking our general fund budgeted building, capital, resiliency, wastewater, reclaimed water, stormwater, and showing our budget to actuals in a summary format. We do have the long-term strategies, or we will be putting those long-term strategies in place for financial success, to include some of the fee and impact studies, the 10-year financial forecast, a reserve policy, implementation of our budget best practices, and revenue diversification, as well as our strategic plan alignment. With that, I can take any questions, and I have a motion.
Thank you, Devin. Commissioners, any questions, comments? Is there a motion?
I move to approve ordinance 2025-13 on first reading.
Second.
City Clerk, if you please do a roll call.
Commissioner Rosnicki?
Yes.
Commissioner Mulholland?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Marriott?
Yes.
Commissioner Robinson?
Yes.
And Mayor Petrilla?
Yes. Next, we have item 7D, final reading of ordinance 2025-11.
An ordinance of the City of St. Pete Beach, Florida, amending City Code Chapter 46, Environment, Article 2, Nuisance Division, 2, subsection 2, abatement procedure, sections 46-61 through 46-66, and Chapter 46, Environment, Article 5, Chronic Nuisance Property Code, Division 1, Chronic Nuisance Services, sections 46-141 through 46-152, to provide for due process special magistrate hearings and procedures for the abatement of nuisances, providing for codification, conflict severability, correction of scrivener's error, construction, publication, and an effective date.
I'd like to offer a couple items that, to amend on this. One is the 7 days from the date of notification. I think 7 days is not necessarily enough considering our current. A lot of people not home. I think 14 days might be more reasonable. And then also, if they went in special magistrate, why are they paying administrative fees? I mean, it's anywhere else you go, you don't pay administrative fees if you win.
This is if, it's just like code enforcement. If we're a code enforcement and the city wins, then the violator has to pay the administrative fees of having me be there, having the special magistrate be there, having staff be there, because it costs time.
Understood, but if I brought something against me that I'm brought up for, and I can prove that my tree is not a nuisance or whatever.
Oh, then you don't have to pay it.
Well, it doesn't read that in here. I think it reads it.
What section are you in?
It's the mowing and I'm more concerned with the mowing and the tree trimming.
Okay.
Yeah, I have concerns about that section as well. I'm concerned about the lot mowing and the tree trimming being at the discretion of the code enforcement officer. I don't watch every code enforcement hearing, but I watch a lot of them, and
like me.
And and I noticed that every magistrate hearing, the code enforcement officers are asked, do you know if the respondent received their registered mail that you sent? And the code enforcement officers every time go, gosh, I don't know. And if they can't even answer a question that they get asked at every single magistrate meeting, I have a hard time having the confidence to let them make a decision on when a lot should be mowed or when a tree should be trimmed that a resident's going to have to pay for.
I think there's a portion in here that says they have to, if it comes back to them, that they have to notify it, post it. It gets posted on the property.
Yeah, but
I'm sorry, could you say that last part again?
I believe there's a portion here that says it gets posted on the property if it receives back, if it gets return mail.
Yeah, they have to mail and they have to post, just like for code enforcement.
Mail and post, okay. I just want to make sure we're covering the basis on that we give people ample opportunity to get notification, number one, and that after they get the notification, they have appropriate time to respond. And if they do respond where they want to go to special magistrate, that if they win, they're not paying court costs or administrative fees. Been there. Yeah.
Did you all want to keep the tree trimming and the grass mowing, or did you want to remove that at second reading? Or did you want to amend it? Somehow? You're allowed to make these types of changes here. You're not adding anything, you're taking things out.
I mean, I would either take it out or amend it to,
let's amend it
so that it has to go before a special magistrate.
Okay, the way it's set up right now is that the property owner would have to request going to special magistrate for tree trimming and lot mowing, which is different than other nuisances. It would automatically go. So we could change it where it automatically goes to special magistrate, even for those two more minor type of nuisances.
At
least you have an objective third party.
The magistrate should be the one who makes the determination on whether the city should take action.
So then we'll set it up so it automatically goes to the magistrate for both.
Or does it have to be any different? I mean, does that?
It would be the same as other nuisances.
I guess if we just remove that altogether, then it would just fall under the nuisance category.
If you remove it altogether, then It would just fall under the same category as everything else. If
Yeah.
we find it as a nuisance, they would be treated the same.
Yeah. I mean,
We carved this out because we felt, and perhaps incorrectly, that these were more minor things. But for due process, it's the same. So we could take that out and just treat them the same as every other one. So we would take out 46-63, parent 2 and parent 3 would be deleted. The proposed additional language would not be included. And then we would change 7 days to 14 days.
So if I can comment on the purpose of carving out the tree and grass violations was because it is very labor intensive to automatically track into the special magistrate. So they viewed these as minor nuisances, so you would try to correct them without that administrative process, but still allow that due process if the individual wanted it. So that's...
I don't have a problem with them requesting it. I just need that longer notification period, because I just don't think that's between getting notification and being able to repair something. If it's a tree, if it's something like that. And again, I live on a sidewalk, and I've had my issues with people saying things are not when they are.
So we could put 14 days in for the lot mowing and 14 days in for the tree trimming and 14 days instead of 7 for the other violations too.
I think 14 days is
Universally throughout the ordinance.
You know,
Okay.
or
Let's do that and leave it in and go
business days.
14.
You okay with that?
Yeah, that's fine.
Can I get a clarification? Is this just for grass and trees? Is that what we're saying? That you're only carving
No.
these two out? So any nuisance?
Well, let me explain. This is all for nuisances. And for the typical nuisance, there would automatically be a special magistrate hearing. Okay? So you have to get notice and you go to the hearing. For lot mowing and tree trimming, because the grass is growing and it's growing up, do you want to wait 3 months before you get to the point?
Yeah, that could
They would say, we're going to go ahead and the city's going to cut your grass, city's going to trim your tree, and then we're going to ask you to pay for it. If you don't think the grass should be cut, if you don't think the tree needs trimming, then you request a special magistrate hearing. You would have 14 days notice before we were going to go and trim, and within those 14 days, if you request a hearing, then you would go on the next month's code enforcement special magistrate hearing, which are scheduled on, I think it's the second Monday of every month.
And then can you explain the other significant change?
The other significant change is it's no longer the burden of the city manager to hear these cases. It will go to the independent special magistrate. The city manager is not independent, one, and two, the city manager isn't trained in the law, isn't trained to hold these evidentiary hearings. The special magistrate does this every month.
Right. My question, and I'm all for that, don't trust me, I'm not trying to change it or go back to you, but I do listen to these special magistrates. This last, whatever day we are, Tuesday, Monday, was kind of difficult to listen to because, some of the work on nuisances takes a lot of time, right? When you think of permitting, right? There was someone who pleaded their case, special magistrate says, you have till the next whatever meeting to get this done, but you got to get a contractor. You got to get maybe a landscaper. If you're removing a large tree that's, a $3,000 to $4,000 project or whatever it may be, you might not be able to, get it done. I heard the special magistrate asked to get a permit, right? So just open a permit.
Permit application.
Yes, the permit
I
application.
think there was one that wanted the actual permit received.
Correct.
Yes.
But how, it's not correcting it, right? And I could see the frustration in the people, who were presenting because, they don't even know what they're going to do with their house. And some of these cases had to do with damage from the hurricane. So, fix your soffit. You got to open up a permit to fix your soffit, yet you don't really know if you're going to, and that one was actually there, it was about soffit. You don't even know if you're going to live in your house. Like, when did the soffit become such a nuisance, that when you don't know if you're going to be there or demolish your home or lift your home, and we all know that the permitting process could be long. I guess the question, in the communication, I don't know if we can, this is, I guess, to the city attorney, can we communicate with a special magistrate and say, okay, this is the situation of our city? I know she understands we've just experienced a hurricane, but does she really understand the lengthy process it is to just even get a permit?
So code enforcement has the discretion to give time for compliance, and that's where they make that determination in the direction of the code enforcement director and the city manager. They have discretion in these cases. Which ones to bring, when to bring them, how much time to give them to apply for a demolition permit for a house, and how much time to obtain a permit for an outdoor bar that was operating, or how much time to apply for a soffit. The soffit case, I think the problem was that the owners didn't know. When they found out, they immediately started taking actions to correct. But there is one house that came up where it probably needs to be demolished. That would be the kind of thing, if they don't have the money to demolish, or if it's an absentee owner that is not responding whatsoever, we can't reach them, that we may have to take that through the nuisance abatement proceeding and demolish a house that's
Or they might be in
an
the
attractive
process of
nuisance or
getting
something.
a grant, like maybe they're trying to find funding.
Usually if they show up and they explain that, then they get the more time. It's the ones that we can't find, that don't show up, there are the harder ones to address, where no one is there, and it's someone, a trustee for a trust in Missouri. Those are harder. But yeah, each one of these cases has to be looked at on a case-by-case basis, and you have to be much more careful when you're demolishing a home than you are when you're cutting someone's grass, obviously. Mhm.
You have any audience comments?
Yes, John Kersman.
And maybe I'll be talking this much. But this one, I did some research on this because it was really concerning me, especially the lawn part. I'm really very, very nervous about that, if you put the camera on that. I understand the spirit of this, like you have lawns like this, but even the county can't get, even at this point, the county can't manage to fix the reclaimed water yet in the picture. And, 3 houses down, you have beautiful lawns, so I understand. And then down the street, you have lawns like this. Is this going to be captured by this as a violation? And then another beautiful lawn. And then a block from the city hall here, we have this. Is this going to be addressed? So I raised a few issues before at the last meeting. What's too long? What do you do about the no man's land? What about the cost? What about the notice? Dunedin, they had a $30,000, it took 5 years to get that mess straightened out. They only finished the lawsuits last year. This is what you're going to be opening up with these lawn liens if you don't do it carefully. And then I did some research. In the other ordinance, in 9866, we say your grass should not exceed 10 inches in height. Okay? I get my lawn done by a guy every 2 weeks. I was out of town for 3 weeks. I came back, and the weed was already up to my knees. So you're one lawn cutting away from being a violation of this law already. And you're going to have the city already chasing you or mowing your lawn? I think we need to be careful here. So I watched yesterday's hearing, and this was one of the houses, and they did have some debris issue and a door jam and a soffit issue, but this is what they were concerned about, the palm fronds, and they were concerned about that's the grass and the trash. These are all the pictures of the trash and debris they showed. And this was the reason that they were going to be taking care of this property. And when it came time this was the notice, and when I get my mail forwarded from New Jersey to here, it took 30 days. And I haven't been forwarding my mail the other direction. I just waited until I came back 3 weeks later. So I'm not going to get the notice. So you have to give 30 days. Or, in general, set it up that we can give you an email address, or pick up the phone, or think about what happened in the Brazzini case here yesterday. Let the tenant know, or try to reach all the people involved. You have the guy that was in Panama with his wife. So on the case yesterday, do you know what the certified mailing was returned at all? The code enforcement. Not on the top of my head. No, sorry. And then they proceeded to do the whole case, and now that homeowner has 14 days, and the homeowner wasn't even there to defend themselves. So, and what's the fine? $250 per day, or would it be per cutting? And then it's $329 of administrative fees and the cost for the lien. So I have some suggestions if you want to read them. That was my last slide anyway.
Thank you, sir.
So
I'll
I'm
leave
very
them up for a
concerned about
second,
this
so
long
I'll take a
distance.
picture of it. Hold on.
Sorry?
Can you put that back up again? I'll take a picture of it. I couldn't read that fast.
Sorry. Yeah, give me 1 second. It was basically,
It'll be on the city website.
it was basically concerned about the
Or if you could send it to the
Here it
clerk, the PowerPoint.
Here it is.
Yeah.
tenants rule, publicize it, let people know. And then also, that law also said, that ordinance also said, that you are responsible from your property line to this curb for the grasses. But it doesn't say it is for the trees. And last year, there was a case where the code enforcement wanted to find somebody, and the judge said, no, our ordinances don't address trees, so we want to probably address that too. What do you do about trees in the right of way? But I really hope you don't do this lawn cutting and set up a procedure that everyone gets adequate notice through email or some other means, so that, especially when we're not living in our own homes.
Notice is key.
to know about any of these.
I guess we got a little work to do on that. I'm thinking,
Well, some of what he's brought up, we can address in the regular sections on grass and trees. That's different than this. This is just a nuisance abatement. And if you don't want to do any tree trimming and you don't want to do any grass cutting, you can just take those sections out. If it ever becomes a problem to the extent that we have to do, the city has to go in and do something, then
you can add them back in.
we can do it under the normal nuisance abatement code, which it takes a little bit longer, but it gives more due process.
I just think it's a tough time for that with everybody, most people not most, but a lot of people not being in their homes. And again, with the mail, US
think
mail's
it's,
not exactly what it used to be.
I think, this is really set up for the drastic cases, like the one where someone's living in the house and there's just trash accumulating and neighbors are constantly complaining. They have code enforcement liens, but they can't foreclose on those liens, and so the trash just sits there and junk accumulates in this city. And I think many of the neighbors would like to see the city go in, maybe get a contract to clean that place up and take things to the dump. But before you do that, you've got to give due process, and if the violator's living in the house, they're certainly going to get the due process and understand what's happening. But it's for the drastic cases, not for the everyday code enforcement. Typically, we just do the code enforcement, we put the penalty, the fine, and say you have 30 days to go apply for a permit, and they usually take care of it themselves. And then I don't think we would jump in.
Are you separating that from the grass and trees? Because I think there was a provision that allowed for egregious repeat offenders, that the special magistrate could give the city the legal authority to remediate it.
This ordinance gives the magistrate the authority to allow the city to go in, pay money to a contractor to cut the grass, or to trim the tree, or remove the junk and take it to the dump and pay the tipping fee or whatever the garbage hauling is. If the city wants to do that, which would be in the discretion of the city manager working through the code enforcement director. You would say, well, this one's been going on long enough, this needs to happen. It's not for every
What
day.
happens when they continuously do the same, like the grass you
I mean,
said?
some
3 weeks it's
cities-
growing again, and then the city's got to go out there and cut the grass again, because they're like, well, I'll just wait for
You
it."
don't have to go out and cut the grass under this program. It's only those lots that are so egregious that the city wants to go cut the grass. And we could even, the city manager has that discretion, but she could give you a report, hey, before we go take all the junk out of this particular house yard, I'll come to you and get authorization first, because we don't want to do that as staff without getting city council aware of it. Some of these things have public relations impacts too, like the slide showed the 5 years arguing over the grass and lawsuits over that. We don't want to get ourselves in a situation where we're over enforcing or going after hurricane remodeling or hurricane, giving people sufficient time after a hurricane to do things. But there are other violations that we really need to address more quickly. Right now, we have the nuisance abatement code, but this goes to the city manager, which is not the place it should go. It should go to the special magistrate. But before it goes to the special magistrate, the city manager could decide, hey, this is a case we want to take there. Or she could say, hey, just do the regular code enforcement here. Let them eventually cut their own
We wouldn't enter
grass.
someone's property until the special magistrate had said,
Mhm.
we had a case that was compelling enough that she or he would support. We do have cases in the city where the nuisance has become pervasive enough that it's creating rat infestation in the neighbors. Your next door neighbor is causing a rat infestation because of the amount of garbage. So right now, we can't do anything. We just we can, we have fines. But like that example you just had, they're in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. So it's whether we want to just keep fining and living with the nuisance or fix the nuisance, and it does get added to the lien amount. There is the possibility that it reoccurs. So there are some very, very complex cases, and it's how long do you want to live with it? How much do we want to spend to remedy it? I think they're so few and far between, it would be something I would bring here.
Yeah, I
So
was
that the
gonna-
community would know we are going to, unfortunately, take a measure that may be popular for some and unpopular for others.
One example, Fort Myers Beach, after Hurricane Ian, there's a structure that needs to be demolished, but the owner refuses to demolish it, refuses to fix it, just walked away from the property. FEMA is doing their audit and review. They say, hey, you need to take this building down that's been condemned. It can't just stay there forever. So you have to eventually remove it. If you can't get the owner to remove it, then you're going to have to remove it.
Okay, so I'll make a motion to approve the final reading of ordinance 2025-11 with the amendment of 14 days' notice.
But leaving in the grass mowing and the tree trimming.
I'll second.
City Clerk, if you'll please do a roll call.
Commissioner Mulholland,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Marriott,
No.
Commissioner Robinson,
No.
Commissioner Rosnicki,
Yes.
Mayor Petrilla.
Yes. Motion passes. Next, we have item 7E, first reading of ordinance 2025-14.
An ordinance of the City of St. Pete Beach, Florida, amending the code to sunset and end all the duties of the Library Advisory Board by deleting Chapter 22, Boards, Committees, Commissions, Article 5, Library Advisory Committee, Code Sections 22-136 through 22-144, providing for codification, conflicts, severability, correction of scrivener's errors, construction, publication, and an effective date. I think we discussed this at a prior meeting or workshop where the city council determined, or the commission determined, that the tasks of the library advisory board are now being efficiently handled by the city staff and volunteers who work through the not-for-profit Friends of Library organization.
Yeah, and I talked to the Friends of the Library, and they've had some, they need positions filled as well, so we could combine, which would be nice.
So it would end the city's library advisory committee, and they could serve on the Friends of the Library board.
Right.
Okay. Commissioner?
I wasn't here for the discussion at the last one. I had to leave early at that meeting, but what I wanted to bring up, because I did bring this up, I don't know, it might have been like a year ago at this point, because, and this is why I brought up the charter review. When we talked about it in the commission, I think only Commissioner Marriott and the mayor were here at that time, we had basically said to task with Amber, our prior city clerk, to do a charter review, because we brought up the library. We said we already have a Friends, the library, and as a matter of fact, the same people on the Friends of the Library are on the library committee advisory, and can we do that kind of stuff? And so we went on, and then we said there was other things that we may have to look at. I don't know what the status was on that. I know, you both are new here, but we did discuss it at that time. And then, I know we always have a ton of things going on, so, but that's what it was. And we wanted to look at each committee, some including the beach stewardship, because I remember even Mr. Kurzman, who's out there, was up here, because they were talking about, well, we only meet twice, and maybe we should be meeting more. And I know beach ordinance was going on at that time, and should we entertain this with, again, final was, we need to look at the charter, is what we all said. So anyways, I wanted to bring that up. I'm all in favor of this because we were, I think, pretty much all in agreement at another commission, but I always just want to remember that we did say that back then.
Commissioner Mulholland?
Who's representing the city on this?
Both of us are.
Has this been communicated to the advisory board members?
Yes, my understanding is Betsinda, before she left, had talked to them, and also the Friends of the Library, and there was general agreement from everyone who participates.
Okay, because I know I haven't spoken to my appointee about it, so I would hate to vote to approve something without having communicated to the person that I asked to serve for the city about it.
Yeah, this is only first reading, so we have to have a second reading. We'll give you a little bit of time.
But as I understand it, they should know.
They should. If this is approved on first read, I will make the extra effort to make sure and confirm that they know exactly what we're doing.
Okay, thank you.
And I think Commissioner Robinson, Commissioner Mulholland, was saying that some people, there's empty seats, right, on the Friends, so.
On the Friends,
we could talk to our
library
appointee about, hey, you could still basically serve on the same capacity, but,
I think they'll poach them anyway. I think they'll poach them.
Is there a motion?
I move to approve first reading of ordinance 2025-14.
I second.
City Clerk, if you'll please do a roll call.
Vice Mayor Marriott,
Yes.
Commissioner Robinson,
Yes.
Commissioner Ruznicki,
yes.
Commissioner Mulholland,
Yes.
Mayor Petrilla.
Yes. Commissioner Ruznicki had some items for discussion, 7 minutes.
Yeah. Well, we already knocked one out, which was a charter review. The conditional use permit, this has always been a question for me, especially because typically I find out when a resident calls or a commercial property calls and has an issue with whatever might be around them, and then I find out, oh, well, that property has a conditional use permit, but I don't know where to go. Where's the list of all approved conditional permits, when they expired, what they entail? We seem to find out later. Sometimes I hear things in special magistrate, and I'm like, well, that property has a conditional use permit. So I'm kind of really stuck on that because I continuously have issues with certain properties that do have a CUP. And, like today, I know that there is continuous issues with a property, and yet we get a list that says you've only had 3 in 3 years, when I know for a fact it's not true. So there's a problem when someone calls in and says, hey, I have a complaint, and cases are closed, if they're ever even open, but it's a conditional use permit that was approved by the commission, and the commission doesn't even know that that's happening. So there's a disconnect in communication, and I would hope that somehow we can find a process to help us, know where to go. We didn't all approve every CUP here in the city.
I can work on that.
Thank you.
I find that there's definitely a disconnect between complaints and the logging of the complaints within code enforcement, and acknowledging that so that goes on record for a CUP. So we definitely have a situation there that needs to get addressed for that.
And we mentioned Samora a couple of times. Well, they
I'm
have
not
a
mentioning
conditional
names.
application, noise that was approved by a commission. Why do we keep hearing it? So anyways.
Same with the sheriff's department, which is maybe why we need our own police department. But I'll let you all work that one out.
Yeah, the sheriffs don't know that there's a conditional use with a condition about.
I do agree with you on the difference between when we had one and now that we don't. And I would hope that maybe having a code enforcement personnel on weekends and after hours, minimally on call, would help to assist that, and also logging of these, documenting these complaints. And as well, maybe it's something that CUPs need to start paying for, that code enforcement, because it's not really, shouldn't come out of the residents' pockets to support or employ that position that is basically playing mom to everybody who has a CUP.
Thank you.
My 2 cents.
Now we have reports. City Clerk.
Just real quick, the financial disclosure reports are due in July, and I believe the Florida Commission on Ethics will be sending out a reminder probably this week.
Thank you. City Manager.
Nothing to report.
The Attorney.
Nothing this evening, thank you.
District 4.
Nothing, Mr. Mayor, thank you.
District 3.
Just there's a meeting for the Don Cesar property owners at 6 p.m. at the Warren Webster this Thursday, May 15th, and also on Saturday, there is the Bella Vista Civic Association, their fun time, let's just say. It's not a meeting, but it's just a get-together, so.
District 2.
I'm excited to say that Bill Lowry with Historic Preservation Board is going to work with me at the library May 20th, Tuesday, May 20th, from 5 to 5:45 to talk to residents about historic designation. He'll bring, we'll have applications, kind of go through the process, talk about, the myths and legends of such, and try to get people to sign up.
District 1.
On Tuesday, the 20th at 6 p.m., you can come see me at Mastery's Brewing, have a beer or not, and tell me anything you're concerned about.
Thank you. We are adjourned.